Ottawa.
Local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, August 17th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 17 degrees. In Smiths Falls, 18. Here's what's making news right now. Getting the shot or get tested. That directive for those in healthcare and education in Ontario. That's reportedly going to be announced by the province's top doctor early this afternoon. Here's City News reporter Laura Carney.
The Ford government stopping short of an outright vaccine mandate, but a senior source tells the Canadian Press Cabinet did approve a plan last night which will require employers in education and several healthcare settings to develop strict COVID-19 vaccination policies for their staff. They'll be following a directive from Chief Medical Officer of Health Dr. Kieran Moore, who says those who decline the shots will need to be tested for COVID-19 on a regular basis. The healthcare sector directive will take effect September 7th. The source also telling the Canadian Press the Ministry of Education also intends to introduce a similar COVID-19 vaccination policy for employees at all publicly funded school boards and licensed childcare settings. As for a further easing of COVID-19 restrictions, which would largely impact capacity limits in this province, Dr. Moore reportedly planning to keep the province in Step 3 as is for the time being. I'm Laura Carney.
City News time 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Most areas will have quite a bit of cloud today. The high 22 degrees. It'll feel more like 28 though with the humidity. Some more showers tonight and again tomorrow morning. And there's a possibility of some thunderstorms for Wednesday afternoon. Tomorrow's high 28 will feel like 34. For today, the high near 22.
And right now, 17 degrees in Ottawa. It's 18 in Smiths Falls. Taliban militants are seeking to reassure a wary population in that country their rule is going to be different this time, a day after deadly chaos gripped the capital's main airport as desperate crowds tried to flee the country. The Taliban declared a countrywide amnesty, urging women, for example, to join their government. Following a blitz across Afghanistan that saw many cities fall to the insurgents without even a fight, the Taliban have sought to portray themselves as more moderate when they imposed a brutal rule in the late 1990s. Tropical storm Grace has been drenching Haiti now for just 2 days after that earthquake struck the nation. The storm added to the misery of thousands who have lost loved ones, were injured, or are now homeless. Grace has also forced overwhelmed hospitals and rescuers to act quickly. The country's southwestern area hit the hardest by the quake on Saturday. It began to see heavy rain and strong winds after nightfall last night, and officials warned rainfall could reach 380 millimeters in some areas. Haiti's capital also saw heavy rains. Officials say at least 1,419 people died in the earthquake. City News time 9:03. Police asking for your help. They're trying to find a person wanted on a Canada-wide warrant. Michael Leclerc is known to frequent Smiths Falls, Ottawa, as well as Sault Ste. Marie. He's described as Indigenous, 30 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and 161 pounds. He has brown hair and brown eyes. If you know where he is, you're asked to contact police. We do have his picture up at ottawa.citynews.ca. A proposal for redevelopment at Haringey could include one of the largest private sector affordable housing projects in Ottawa. Hazelview has done community consultation and worked closely with the city, establishing a plan to increase housing units in Haringey, and the developer agreeing to build just over 1,000 of affordable units in that plan. The proposal will go before Ottawa's Planning Committee next Thursday. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Separating headlines
from hearsay.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Polls. And here come all the cliches about polls. Like polls are for dogs. Now, the only poll that matters is the poll on Election Day. But hey, it's an election campaign, so polls come with the territory. And on this day 3 of the federal election campaign, Ipsos pollster, has it looking like this. The Liberals are in the lead. Liberals, 36. Conservatives, 31. NDP, 20. And more than half of those polled say we should not be having an election right now. 56% said no way, no how, Mr. Trudeau, you should not have called this election. But he did, and it's on. Other findings from this poll, when asked, is the country headed in the right direction or the wrong direction? It's about 50-50. 50-50. When asked another classic pollster question, is it time for a change? Are you in the mood for change? Is it time for another party to form the government? 57% said yes. So the Liberals, they have the lead on the top line number, national voting intentions. But it's not like Mr. Trudeau is really sending shivers up anyone's legs anymore. That's one poll that's out. But it's not the only poll. This morning, Leger has a poll out today, and Leger claims that it was the country's most accurate pollster for the last federal election. The election that happened, less than 2 years ago. So here is how Leger has the race. As of today, the Liberals are in the lead. It's Liberals 35, Conservatives 30, NDP 20. Pretty much the same as the Ipsos numbers. When asked, is it time for a change? Are you in the mood for change? Is it time for another party to govern? 50% said yes, and about 50% say they are dissatisfied with the current Liberal government. They are dissatisfied. Almost a quarter of those polled said, I'm not locked in. I haven't made up my mind yet, and I might even change my mind come election day. But 23% haven't made up their mind, might change their mind. What has to be concerning, I think, in this poll from Leger, concerning for Conservative supporters, is that this poll suggests more Canadians trust the Liberals on the post-pandemic economic recovery than trust the Conservatives. Because, let's face it, economic issues, that's supposed to be motherhood and apple pie for Conservatives, right? So it's not encouraging to see them trailing on that score. And that's probably one of the reasons why Leger in this poll says Mr. Trudeau has, quote, the winning conditions. The winning conditions. It's his to lose. And you know what? This poll, it even shows, even Conservatives who say, I've made up my mind. I'm voting for the Conservatives. I'm not changing my mind. I'm voting Conservative. Even a lot of those people don't think the Conservatives are going to win. They're resigned to the fact that the Liberals will probably win. Less than half of decided Conservative voters, according to this poll, actually think the Conservatives will win the election. I'll tell you, though, I bet Erin O'Toole thinks he can win the election. Why else would he be running? He revealed the Conservative Party's platform yesterday. We're going to get into some of it today with him. The leader of the Conservative Party, Erin O'Toole, scheduled to be my guest at 11:30 this morning. Now, fingers crossed. Okay, that is the time slot that his people made available for us this morning. But this is an election campaign, so there's campaigning going on. So politicians have a tendency to run behind schedule. Mr. Trudeau was more than an hour late for his event yesterday. So we'll see what happens. But as of right now, Erin O'Toole supposed to be on City News with me, Rob Snow, at 11:30 this morning. Much to get into with him, of course. We're just a few days into this campaign. And so far, most of the questions for the Conservative leader have been about mandatory vaccines and how his policy differs from the Liberal policy on mandating vaccines. There's a lot of talk going on, ladies and gentlemen, that this was a trap. It was a trap set by those dastardly Liberals. And not the Conservative campaign. They're Conservatives. They're so stupid. They just walked right into it. Okay? Trudeau set the trap and O'Toole just walked right into it. The Liberals were looking for a way to wedge the Conservatives on vaccines, and they appeared to have found it there for a little while. But now it has come to light, although I find the media really hasn't picked up on this to any great degree. Brian Lilly's writing about this for The Sun today. John Ivison briefly mentions it in his column. There's really not a lot of daylight between what the O'Toole campaign's position on mandatory vaccines is for federal government workers and what the federal government, by way of Treasury Board, was already planning to do in advance of public servants going back to the office. There was a memo. The memo was put online from the Treasury Board. You know, the Treasury Board. In charge of the public service, Treasury Board. Planning for the eventuality that some returning public servants would not be vaccinated, sent out a memo on how it planned to deal with those people. How would it deal with those people? Screening. Okay? Testing, masks, these sorts of things. And besides, it's all well and good for the Liberals to say, we are going to mandate vaccines. Even by their own admission, they won't even be able to do anything until sometime in October at the earliest. So, yeah, I think you could make the case that it was a well-set trap by the Liberals because it knocked the Conservatives off their own messaging for the first couple of days. During this short campaign, you don't want to lose any days. You want to be always on your message, your message, your message. You don't want to get knocked off your message. You don't want to have to be issuing 10 o'clock news conferences or 10 o'clock statements, you know? So look, we're all over the federal election campaign again today. Great guests coming up. As I mentioned, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, 11:30 this morning. Michael Taube, right of center. He's on the right side of things. Syndicated columnist, former speechwriter for Stephen Joseph Harper. Michael Taube is with us every week, right after the 11 o'clock news on a Tuesday morning. Childcare. We're going to talk about childcare this morning. $10 a day. Once again, you see the divide between progressives and conservatives. Right now, you have the Liberals. They're going all across the country signing agreements with various provincial governments. $10 a day child care cost shared. The Conservative Party is still having none of that. Because, and really this is one position that hasn't really changed a lot since the Harper years. The position is Conservatives don't like nationalized child care because it puts limits on choice. The O'Toole campaign is instead pitching a tax credit. 75% tax rebate paid directly to parents. Money to parents. Very familiar. Peter John Mitchell is going to join us on that. He's with a local think tank here in town called Cardus, which has never been in favor of nationalized child care. But look, clearly provincial governments are eager for it. And wherever they have done it, it has been wildly popular with parents. So that's coming right up in about 10 minutes from now. Every Tuesday, we're joined by the professor, Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. Going to talk about what these parties are pitching by way of the economic platforms. Tax credits. Big theme, name of the game, really, for the Conservative Party. For the Liberals, it's about extending a lot of the existing support programs that are already in place. And for the NDP, what is it? I mean, it's traditional class warfare. The rich are too rich, and the rest of us are barely getting by, and what we need are wealth taxes and higher corporate taxes. On the situation in Afghanistan, on the Taliban rout, the miscalculation of the West, especially the White House, we will speak with former Conservative cabinet minister, former ambassador to Afghanistan, Chris Alexander. He has not been shy about putting a lot of this on Pakistan. He has been arguing for years Pakistan is engaged in a proxy war in Afghanistan. Pakistan, he has argued, has supported the Taliban for years, if not decades. He has called for sanctions against Pakistan for actions in Afghanistan. We'll get into that with him. And it's election day in Nova Scotia. And they say it's going to be a close one. Could be a close one. A surprise, close election. So close, they might not even know who won until tomorrow. Was not supposed to be a close election. The Liberals were supposed to run away with it. They had a big double-digit lead. But now it's a horse race right down to the wire. We'll get some insight into the Nova Scotia election. Dan Ahlstrand will join us, news director at our sister station, Halifax News 95.7. And, of course, the Talk Back Hour. That's our favorite hour of the day around here. It's an hour of opinions. It's an hour of phone calls. It's an hour of discussion. It's an hour of debate. It's an hour of even the odd argument, or sometimes it's just odd arguments. We do it every morning between 10 and 11. 750-1310 is our call-in line. 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Hottest hour of talk radio in town today. Want to get back into this whole issue of mandatory vaccines. Here we go again. We might hear something from the Ford government on this front at some point today. Mandatory vaccines. Our reporters in Toronto have been all over that news story for days. We know there's a cabinet meeting today. There are these reports that what the Ford government will announce is this. You're going to have to be vaccinated if you work in certain jobs in healthcare and education. And if you don't get vaccinated, you will have to be tested on a regular basis. How regular? I don't know. We'll hear from the Chief Medical Officer of Health at 1 o'clock this afternoon. He's having a news conference. So it's not no jab, no job. It's no jab, get a test. And then another test, and then another test, and then another test because you haven't had the jab. Meantime, with the federal campaign, you have the Liberals saying you have to be vaccinated if you want to work for the government. Doesn't matter what job you do. You have to be vaccinated. Erin O'Toole says that's not where I am on that. The Treasury Board already planning a similar process to what it sounds like the Ford government is going to announce this afternoon for healthcare and education workers. So, yes, I do want to get back into this issue. Because on the federal campaign, this has been the issue for the first few days. Where are you on mandatory vaccines? All for it or no way? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
When it came to opening the business, because I was so young, there was a lot that I didn't know about management, financial management, management of people, all around management, I think is the word that I always come back to. I think that I always had a passion and I knew that I wanted to create a space for people to get their hair done, but I had no idea, even having studied business management, what it really took to open a business as well as sustain a successful business. So in 2014, I was actually working with Angela Sutcliffe. She was my business coach at the time, and she was like, what's your niche? Like, what separates you from other salons? And when we started to really dig, it was the curls. It was the fact that we work with all curl types, curly, kinky, wavy, coily, which is how we identify our curl types. And then you have straight hair as well, of course. But you know, more than 70% of the world has some sort of curl pattern to their hair. And we just realized that that was not being addressed. It wasn't something we learned about in school. So that's, I went to the States and I traveled all over to kind of gain the information that I have now to be able to share it with our clients and as well as with other stylists. So in March when it came, I thought it was gonna last, a week, 2 weeks, through, I think it started off at 2 weeks. And I was like, cool, I have 2 weeks to just relax, that's fine. So I was actually in a position where I was not happy, so to say, but I was a little bit happy, to be honest, just because of what I was experiencing personally. Now, when that extension started to happen, it was not a great feeling. It was very uncomfortable not knowing how I was going to support myself financially. So I'm so excited about the Academy. It's something that I started and I launched it during the pandemic. So I've been teaching for a number of years. I've been educating for a number of years. I educated at Algonquin. I've educated at Versailles Hair Academy. And I've also educated in my own space, in this space and my old space up on Greenbank. And so it was just a continuum of what, I've been doing for these years. When we have a client in our chair, it's not just about making your hair look great. It's about how do you go home and take what we've just taught you and emulate that. So now with a world where people want to quote unquote be diverse and inclusive, what does that really look like in a salon setting? And for me, it looks like being able to invite any curl type, any hair type really, because I can take care of straight hair types just as well as, I can take care of curls. And we cater to all curl types regardless of what you look like on the outside, we got you.
Ottawa icon
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Let's focus on a big election issue, and that is childcare. As I mentioned, you have the Liberals pitching $10 a day. They have signed up provinces already. They have agreements in place, in principle, with various provinces. Meantime, in the Conservative election platform, Erin O'Toole announced a 75% tax rebate that would be paid directly to parents. Peter John Mitchell joins me. He's with the local think tank Cardus, where he is family program director. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
What approach do you prefer?
Well, when we look at the type of care that parents are using, we see that they're using quite diverse forms of childcare. So lots of families are using childcare in daycare centers or in licensed spaces. About 32% would be in centers. 15% would be cared for by a relative other than a parent. Another 12% would be in a family daycare home, so like the lady down the street that offers care out of her home. And then we have 40% of parents who aren't using any form of non-parental care. So it's quite diverse. So forms of policies that help support that diversity of care choices are I think, most helpful for parents. The research that we've done and looked at, my preference would be seeing some sort of support directly to parents that would help them then choose the type of care that they would like.
Okay, so then does the Conservative plan fit the mold then? Mr.
Well,
Mitchell?
if I were creating a platform, I think my platform would look a little bit different than all the parties. I think the language would look a little bit different. This has really been framed in terms of affordability, which I understand, but it's really been also framed around and promoted as an economic policy.
Yes.
Get people back to work.
Get people back to work. Yes.
Yeah, there's that mantra that sort of came out early in the pandemic that an economic recovery would be impossible without childcare. I'm not sure as time has worn on how necessarily true that is. Certainly many people have returned to work, others have not yet. Daycare and childcares have come back online, and in many cases the real challenge is vacancies, as not all folks have returned back to their previous arrangements, and we'll see what happens as people return back to work, as people make their way back into the office, those who are able to work from home. That may change their choice of childcare arrangements. But I would basically start saying that the end user in all of this is children, and we need to be thinking about their well-being and allowing parents to make the best choice for that. So if I were going to buy a platform, I'd go right back to our parental leave policies, and I would look at how we put together those policies. I'd probably move parental leave out of the EI system. I don't think it was designed for that. And really the most expensive type of care is for infants. So if we had perhaps rejigged our parental leave program, I think that would help reduce some of the burden on childcare, and then begin looking at how we can best support parents in whatever choice they make. So again, yes, money to parents, and I think there's a variety of ways to go about and do that.
Okay. In the budget, I mean, the bottom line in the eye-catching number is $10 a day. By 2026, And to do that, the federal government is offering more than $9 billion a year by the fifth year, by 2026, and calls it a 50-50 cost share. You have, at Cardus, crunched some numbers. What could provinces be on the hook for on a yearly basis? Because in a report, you say it's not really going to end up being a 50-50 split.
Right. So before the federal budget was released, we began crunching the numbers, understanding that this was a likely policy direction that would be happening. We looked at what activists for this system are asking for. They're asking for 70% coverage, so spaces for 70% of children under the age of 6. And we crunched the numbers, and we came up with two estimates. Our high estimate was $36 billion annually. So
just
that's
provincially, right?
That's a significant difference, and provinces would be on the line for that kind of coverage. So really, in a 50-50 cost-sharing agreement, if there are going to be shortfalls, that will really fall on provinces to manage that. One of the challenges with reducing daycare costs to parents very quickly in the licensed system is that, as I said before, parents use a variety of forms of care, but only licensed spaces would be reduced very quickly. So you kind of create almost a false demand. People are going to rush to those spaces, but there's not going to be enough spaces to accommodate everyone.
And that is exactly what happened in Quebec, right?
That's exactly what happened in Quebec, and we saw a collapse of independent providers because the government there, in part the way that it implemented the system, and then they had to be teased back with tax rebates and tax sort of incentives to get them back online. So potentially, if it's not done right, potential for creating a bit of a crisis in childcare in terms of some people being able to get very affordable childcare, and others finding themselves outside the system.
Okay. $10 a day. What does it really cost? $50 a day? $70 a day?
Yeah, so
$100 a day? Huh.
Yeah, it's really important to remember that childcare is already highly subsidized in Canada, both federally and provincially, and it's worth noting that it is a provincial responsibility. The systems look very different province to province, and billions of dollars of public money already goes into childcare. That said, if parents will certainly know that they are using a center or whatever, they're paying a lot of money for the spaces, and they're feeling it in their pocketbook. But again, very often that care is already subsidized from government grants and other ways. So it's very expensive to care for vulnerable populations well. And child care will always be expensive, whether that's paid for by the government or paid for by parents or shared, as it is now. And it's very difficult to decrease costs. Technology does not really solve the problem of the cost of care. You still need people there caring for children. It's just one of those provisions like healthcare or like education where cost control is just very difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Nice to hear from you this morning again.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, the Family Program Director at the local think tank Cardus. That's Peter John Mitchell. The Professor Ian Lee from Carleton University. My guest after the news on City News.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, August 17th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 18 degrees, Smiths Falls, 19. And here's what's making news at this hour. The chair of the Ottawa Transit Commission has written to councillors who requested an emergency meeting to deal with rail and bus issues over the last week. Alan Hubley telling councillors McKenney and Deans while he shares concerns about the transit system. A full update will come during this next regular meeting next month for the Transit Commission. Hubley also says the GM of Transit and the director have both been providing regular updates. Chances are the mayor and a couple of councillors may be asked about this in the next hour or so. Jim Watson, along with Matthew Fleury and Tim Tierney, are all at the completion of the renewal project on Williams and Rideau. The direction from the province's top doctor will not be a vaccine mandate for education and healthcare workers, but anyone who does not take the shot in those fields will have to be tested for COVID on a regular basis. Apparently, Dr. Kieran Moore will also announce this afternoon at 1 o'clock the province will remain in the current reopening step for the time being, not ready to expand the current things like capacity limits. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Saying good morning to the professor, the poor professor from the Glebe, Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you so much, Professor. Very kind of you to say.
I hope you had a wonderful honeymoon.
I did indeed. We managed to do this kind of whirlwind road trip to Atlantic Canada. So
great. It's beautiful down there. Atlantic Canada's lovely.
Yeah, it was really strange though, Professor, because you hit New Brunswick and you just drive right into New Brunswick. Like, no checkpoint, nothing. And that's all gone. Once you get off the Confederation Bridge and you're on Prince Edward Island, big, long lines, and they want to ask you all kinds of, where have you been, where you have to fill out your PEI pass and everything else.
Oh, my goodness.
And then you drive, we drove from Prince Edward Island to Cape Breton. We get to the border near Amherst, Nova Scotia, and just kind of a cursor. There is a checkpoint there, but all they're doing really is, do you have your pass? Yes, we have our pass. Here's our pass. Okay, welcome to Nova Scotia, and away you go. But Prince Edward Island had lifted their mask mandate, so you didn't have to wear a mask inside a store, which was the first time we had encountered that, and it was strange. It was strange after a year and a half of wearing a mask everywhere.
Yes.
To not have to wear one in a retail store was kind of strange.
That is nice.
Yeah. But great weather. The one thing that annoyed me was driving from Prince Edward Island to Cape Breton was $52 in tolls. It was $48.50 because you pay the toll for the Confederation Bridge when you're leaving Prince Edward Island.
I see.
Not when you're entering. So it was $48.50 for a little Honda Civic to get over the bridge, and they charge you by the axle. And then they have a toll road called the Cobequid Pass, which is another $4. So it was like before I put a drop of gasoline in the car, I pay $52.50 just to drive to Nova Scotia. It's ridiculous.
And it was built with federal taxpayer money, too.
So anyway.
Yes.
What have you thought? We're 3 days into this now. This is the third day. What have you thought so far of the election campaign?
I know that everybody has often said, every election is momentous, and of course it is, because you're electing the government that has great control over us in terms of regulation, taxation, and so forth for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. I did look. I don't pretend to have read every last line of the Conservative platform. I skimmed it.
Yeah.
I also skimmed the Liberal platform, which is, by the way, on their website. And I think that and I'm sure there's a lot of people saying, oh my goodness, it's so confusing, and the Liberal one is 85 pages, the Conservative one, I can't remember how many, but I think it's longer than that.
Yeah.
And well, where do I start, where do I end? But there is a pattern in the data. I'm always looking for patterns in the data, trends, because I teach strategy, and strategy is all about seeing trends in data. That's why you got to look at data all the time to see what's actually happening, as opposed to what some people claim is happening. So I looked at the two, and I do believe that there is a trend. There are profound differences between the two. Let's just talk about the Liberals.
Okay, what do you see specifically that are big differences between the two then?
I'm going to go almost philosophical.
All right.
The Liberals are putting forward it's called Forward - a real plan for the middle class. I have it on my computer screen as I'm talking to you. I think you could characterize it as top down. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And the Conservative plan is bottom up. And these aren't buzzwords. The Conservative plan, when you step back, and sure there's some overlap and some similarities, but there are a lot of differences. And the Conservative plan is much more focused on stimulating growth in the private sector by businesses using incentives called tax incentives. In other words, it's very clear, even if these words don't cross O'Toole's mouth, that they see the private sector, entrepreneurship, small biz, medium-sized biz, big biz, as the driver of growth and prosperity. The Liberal plan, and by the way, there will be lots of people who say that this is perfectly legit, and I'm not suggesting it isn't. It's not my cup of tea, because I don't believe it, but there's going to be lots that do. The Liberal plan is very much, when I say top-down, and by the way, John Ibbitson had a column. Everyone should go read it. Trudeau's federal government is bigger, bolder, and more controlling. Is that what you want? That's the title of the Globe and Mail, John Ibbitson, 2 days ago. The Liberal plan is very much more top-down, based on, grounded mostly, not exclusively, on redistribution of income. So they clearly believe, whether one agrees or not, they believe, and they've put themselves out there, fair enough, good for them. They've said, here's our plan, and it involves the federal government spending a lot more money redistributing income from higher income people to lower income people, and from certain projects they don't like to certain projects they do like, such as in the environment, and it will put the government will have a much larger say in many parts of the economy. So government will be much more interventionist. I would say intrusive, but that's showing my bias. So let's use the word interventionist. And by definition, government intervention is top down, because the government is run out of a central thing called the Federal Government of Canada. It's run out of federal government departments called Environment Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Industry Canada, and so on. So it's two different philosophies. If you believe that the people in the various government departments have a deeper and better understanding of where money should be spent, invested, how you should innovate, then you'll like the Liberal plan. If you believe that the public servants, and by the way, this isn't trashing public servants. I'm a public servant, for goodness sake. And I have tons of friends. Most of my family worked in the federal public service, and I think they're very well educated, and we have a very professional public service. But at the same time, I just don't believe that somebody sitting at 235 Queen Street for 30 years knows more about the airline business, for example, or the flower business, if you're a flower retailer selling flowers. The people that know the most about flower retailing are the people that run flower retailing businesses. The people that know the most about airplanes and airlines are the people that run airlines. And I can go on and list every industry in Canada and say the same thing. In other words, when you're in the market, in the game, running your business day to day, dealing with customers, dealing with suppliers, you have a deeper, vastly deeper understanding than you do when you're flying at 35,000 or 50,000 feet. This is not trashing government. Government's extremely important as the referee of the hockey game. But Mr. Trudeau's vision is going far beyond. In fact, as Ibbitson says, he's killed the so-called Ottawa consensus that governed Ottawa, both federal Conservatives and Liberals, for many years, that said basically in my language, not Ibbitson's, that the role of government is to act as the referee of the hockey game, but not tell the hockey players when to shoot the puck, or tell the hockey coach or general manager which players to trade and which players to acquire. This plan is much more interventionist, where government will be making, federal government departments will be making these very large strategic decisions, whether it's on infrastructure, through the infrastructure bank, or whether, you name the investment or the spending area.
Okay.
And the government will be really making the decisions. They'll be telling they'll become the coach and general manager of the hockey team. And the conservative vision is it's still pretty expansive, but it's the conservative vision put up by 2 days ago or yesterday is pretty expansive and involves spending, but it's the difference is very critical. They're proposing incentivizing the private sector to go do something. They're not telling the private sector how to do it, what to do it, when to do it. They're just saying, if you go do this, and spend money on capital investment, we will reimburse you for some of it. But you make the decision. And so for all the people listening, you don't have to read. I mean, sure, go read the 2 plans. Good for you. I mean that. It's long and detailed, and they have lots and lots of information and lots of detail. But if you say, well, okay, but what's the meaning? What's the difference? Big picture difference between the two. And they're 2 fundamentally different visions about economic growth, economic prosperity, the future of Canada. One is top-down, much more government-led, government-driven, government-decided, and that's the Liberal plan.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, we're on pace for about 2.5% economic growth for 2021 in Canada. We have an unemployment rate of 7.5%. We have an inflation rate that's about 3%, so it's a little higher than certainly what the Bank of Canada would like it to be, but low interest rates nonetheless. Just given the rebound in the economy here in the second half of the year, do we need any of these? Do we really need any of these measures, whether they're big government, big top-down controlling measures, or these series of targeted tax credits as offered by the Conservative Party, or is this economy doing pretty well as is? What do you think?
Well, you probably will recall, I'm sure you'll recall that I've been talking about this for months upon months. Yeah. And I have completely rejected very clearly, unambiguously, Chrystia Freeland's a repeated claim that we're in the middle of a pandemic recession. And I said it is just simply specious nonsense. It is statistical, factual, economic nonsense to say that you're in a recession when the economy is growing at 6%. I think everybody can understand it. Even if people that have never studied a moment of economics can understand that recessions are when the economy is shrinking. It's getting smaller. The number is negative.
Right.
Negative growth.
Jobs are being lost.
You cannot argue that we're in a recession when we're growing gangbusters at 6%.
Right.
As she claimed. Talk about speaking on both sides of your mouth. The economy is growing at 6%. In the previous quarter, she said in the budget, it grew at 10%. And by the way, we're in a recession. No. A contradicts B. Everybody understands that.
Okay.
So to your question,
right.
I think that now I will criticize the Conservative plan. I think that they were spooked and frightened.
Okay.
That they were going to be accused of being callous and all that stuff.
Austerity. So they'd be accused of instituting austerity or wanting austerity.
And so instead of saying and speaking truth to power, like I do, saying, look, people, there is no recession. There is 250,000 people still unemployed compared to pre-recession. And they're coming back to work very quickly. And the economy is doing gangbusters. And we've got to bring the stimulus to an end. We've got to bring it to an end. We've got to, if anything, if we're going to continue to give out any income support, there should be income support for going back to work. And saying, bringing back, how about the principles of the unemployment insurance system, which is that you must be looking for a job and you can't turn down a job if it's in your wheelhouse, in your area where you live. And he didn't do that because I think he's just too afraid of, being clobbered and being attacked by journalists and being attacked by the opposition, the other parties, saying he's callous and he's beating up on people that are in tough times and so forth. But if we're going to grow the economy, if we're going to develop long-term, permanent, good growth, we can't be doing it by encouraging people to remain unemployed. Because to use the great line of Mr. Trudeau himself, we're all in it together. And that means we've all got to rely on each other going to work each day and doing our job in our part of the world. I've got to teach the students. And the people at Loblaws have to stock the shelves. and so on and so forth. But encouraging people by saying, look, you don't have to get a job. You hate your job? Great. Stay home. We'll give you $2,000 a month. That's not helping the long-term trajectory of the economy. And for those who say it's being harsh on the unemployed, let me quote someone else. Karl Marx, founder of communism, Marxism, said that we become more fully human through our labor, which suggests very clearly that you're less human if you're not working. That's what Marx was saying. You don't become fully humanized human. I believe that work is good. I'm doing it because I love to work. I'm not doing it because I'm broke and I need money. I love to teach. I love being in the classroom. And I think most of us like our jobs. Okay, some people hate their jobs. Okay, good for them.
Get another job.
I feel sorry for them.
Get another job.
Get another job. Get a job you love. But, and so to your point, I think that certainly I've criticized the Liberals for this, for not incenting people to get back to work as quickly as possible. But I'm also criticizing O'Toole for there's a lot of spending in there that's going to perpetuate this. Now, at least he says, I'm going to bring it to an end, and I'm going to balance the books by X date. And
10 years.
And the Liberals are not promising that.
Okay. Look, when we come back, I do want to talk about the NDP. It's class warfare, tax the rich, tax corporations. But I do want your take on that because it's certainly politically very popular.
I'm not so sure it is, but okay.
Yeah, it is. And on housing affordability and what the Conservatives are proposing, it's a whole bunch of things, and it's a lot of it is quite interesting. I'd like your take on it. Ian Lee is with us from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Well, we all loved our rock T-shirts growing up, right? It was our badge. Hey, we went to this concert. We knew that band inside out. So we kept doing that and kept promoting that. What's sort of happening now is that audience is dying. I always say the earth is flat. So the 60s rockers are falling off the end of the earth. So you don't see as big a sales anymore because my audience is disappearing. What's sort of helping to promote that history is the kids are buying vinyl. And luckily we have a vinyl shop in the neighborhood here, a record center. So what's happening is I've seen kids come in with their dad. And the dad say, hey, do you have any Beatles shirts? Do you have any CBGB? Do you have any of this? I said, well, why? He said, well, because my daughter's into it. She's wearing my T-shirt. So slowly it's coming back, right? The kids are, I think, getting fed up with the generic music that's out there. And they want to click into something that, first of all, links them to their parents, something that they thoroughly enjoy now, and maybe they're passing it on to their grandkids. Pandemic has been a couple of things, definitely hard on everybody. So much messaging that's out there that people don't understand, stats that every day, Jesus Murphy, like I'm getting a headache just reading this stuff, right? So really it was just trying to understand where we were going to go from there. The city of Ottawa all of a sudden said, everybody's got to wear a mask. You got to wear it on the bus. People were scrambling, okay? And I had, the store next door had really big windows, so I just flooded the window with masks. Well, that was the activity that saved the business. People were coming in buying 2, 3, 4 masks at a time at $20 a pop here. But my masks were so different. They were the Rolling Stones, Beatles, Queen, all the pop culture. Everything else out there was medical masks. And right, so people said, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to show my rock and roll. So it became the new T-shirt as far as I'm concerned. Well, what I've done, I'm Hindenburg. I'm now at 1114A Wellington Street, which is next door to the Fab Gear store. And the reason I've changed names, I've rebranded the store, is because I was planning on retiring. And in December, I go, oh, I'm not going to retire. But I've committed to changing what the store is about. So I came up with a new name, Fab Gear's Rock Shop, where legends are dressed. And essentially get that message out. I prefer, if the shirt don't fit, you come in, you try another one on. People like to feel the fabrics with clothing. It's amazing. Y'all come in and go, oh, I love that. Oh, can I try this? So that's the big difference. I'm not out to make a gazillion dollars. I stick the way I am, old school. I take cash, we take cards. Come on in and talk to the owner.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
We're back with Professor Ian Lee, Professor of Management, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, with us every Tuesday morning. So it's class warfare for the New Democrats. They want to go after the rich. The rich don't pay their fair share. I would note it's a wealth tax. They are promoting a wealth tax, which is a much different animal than an income tax, for example. Right. It's a tax on your entire net worth, your entire estate, if you will.
Yeah.
$10 million or more. The ultra rich is what Mr. Singh calls them. And going after corporations who have made, quote unquote, excess profits. I don't know how you define that. Excess profits. During the pandemic period, but higher corporate taxes. What do you think about that as an economic approach?
Well, let's deal with some facts first. You know,
okay,
I'm factual,
sure.
I'm evidence-based, and this is hard data, okay?
All right.
I'm quoting you.
All right.
And anybody out there in Radio Land who wants me to send you an email of the source of the data, I'll be more than pleased to, and I can show you lots of data. Let's deal with the income side first, rather than the asset side, which is wealth, okay?
Yeah.
I do note that he's talking more about the asset side now than he is the income inequality side. As you probably know, I didn't pull my punches. I just trashed him for the last 2 years when he said inequality is going up in Canada. That's a bald-faced fraud. StatsCan and OECD shows inequality has been going down, D-O-W-N, down, since 2006 until now. So it is not true. It was in the Bank of Canada's speech by the governor of the Bank of Canada in September of last year. So anybody can go Google it and look it up. And you can see the graph showing inequality going down. Because he said it was skyrocketing and going up. Absolutely fraudulent and false. Now let's deal with the tax of how the quote rich don't pay their taxes.
Don't pay their fair share of taxes.
I know he slipped that in now. I've noticed that in the last little while they're talking about fair share, and it's very clever of them to do that because what he's still saying is I still think is fundamentally dishonest.
Okay.
Sorry for those out there who think I'm being unkind. Listen to me carefully. This is straight out of hard data from taxation. The top 20%, that's the top fifth of Canadians, pay 2/3, 63% of Canada's total income taxes, federal and provincial. The bottom 20%, which we colloquially call the poor, the bottom 20% of families in Canada pay 1% of personal income taxes and 2.3% of total income taxes because of the progressivity of the Canadian system where you pay a much higher rate of tax the higher your income goes up. And if you're in the bottom 20%, I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but subsequent multiple finance ministers have taken more and more people at the bottom end off the taxation payroll. So most people in the bottom 20% are not paying taxes, period. And some pay a little small amount. But the point is that the idea that and I've actually heard people say this to me, I've written me emails, the poor pay all the taxes. No, they don't. The poor pay 1%. The bottom 20% pay 1% of all the income taxes in Canada, personal income taxes, and 2.3% of total taxes, which includes GST and property taxes. Remember, they get rebates and all kinds of redistribution of income goes on with the bottom. I'm not saying that's wrong. There's a consensus in Canada. We want a progressive system. Yes, we do. We have it. So, Mr. Singh, stop deceiving Canadians that we don't have a progressive income tax system. Yes, we do. The data's on the record in multiple sources. Anybody can look it up. Okay, so let's get that off the table, this idea that the poor pay all the taxes or most of the taxes and the rich don't pay any taxes. It is absolutely false. Okay, it is taxation statistics false, Mr. Singh. Stop deceiving Canadians.
We got you.
Okay. Now on the wealth side,
yes,
what he's dealing there, and I've talked about this before in terms of the Oxfam report, which is the international report, and this is where we tax, by and large, in every Western country, we tax mostly income. Income's much easier to tax. You file a tax return every year. Wealth is more tricky and more difficult. And I say that because, first off, a lot of the wealth...
Just let me interrupt here.
Sure.
I had a reporter on... what was where was he, David? Do you remember about the wealth tax? The ProPublica. He was from ProPublica. Does a lot of work with Frontline.
Right.
You take someone like Jeff Bezos. What's Jeff Bezos worth now? $200 billion, right? He's got his own rocket ships to the moon, for crying out loud. This guy. His salary is $80,000 a year. Right. So he pays very little tax. In some years, he pays no income tax.
Because he has no...
Sometimes he gets a rebate from the government. He pays so little tax. He gets money back from the government. Right? Richest man in the world. So why shouldn't we tax his wealth instead of his income?
I'm glad you brought that up.
All right, 2 minutes.
There's without getting into the... Well, let me just deal first off why this is a... I think it's a bit of a phony baloney argument. A person starts a company. Okay? And they're an entrepreneur. We call them entrepreneurs.
Sure.
And the odd, not very many, a tiny, tiny number are able to grow the company so it becomes much bigger than just themselves and their family. And eventually, the odd, like 1 in a billion, become a Microsoft or an Apple or a
Amazon.
Jeff Bezos Amazon. Okay, so what is going on here? Let me explain, okay? So he owns the shares because he founded the company, all right? So he is very successful at creating something that you and I want to buy. Let's use Apple iPhone and talk about Steve Jobs, okay? Even though he's dead, his wife has all the money now, okay? So he builds a better mousetrap. He builds a better iPhone, and then lots and lots of people say, boy, that's a really cool iPhone. Let's go buy it. And so more and more people buy the iPhone, and what happens to the share price? It goes up, up. Okay? So in other words, he becomes wealthier and wealthier. The better he is, more successful he is at servicing the wants and needs and desires of consumers, okay? And now what these critics are saying is this is a terrible thing. My joke about airlines, let's say you own shares in an airline, and the airline is doing very, very well, servicing its customers, customer complaints are way down, the share price keeps going up. Well, we know from past, because I actually came across a study on this from a few years ago in the States, that if an airline tragically has an airline crash and a plane goes down and kills 200 or 300 people, guess what happens to the share price? It tanks. It goes overnight. It drops 50, 60, 70, 80%. In other words, the wealth of the owners of the airline goes down dramatically if they do something awful or something awful happens. So when you decode what the NDP are saying, or Oxfam for that matter, or the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, they're saying that the share price going up, which is a consequence of a company being very successful.
Doing well.
And doing well at providing what customers want, that they should not be so successful and so competent and
Professor,
at dealing with
you probably pay more tax than the richest man in the world.
I probably do. I pay a lot.
And you think that's right?
You know, the alternative, and I'll answer your question. Yes, I do. I'll explain why.
Okay. Well,
okay? So the alternative, when you really, and by the way, these words will never cross the lips of Jagmeet Singh or Oxfam or the Canadian Centre.
All right. Well, let's hear them cross yours. Come on, we got to go.
It won't cross my lips. What they're really saying, if you follow the logic to its conclusion, we should expropriate their wealth and have these companies owned by government. And, well, that experiment was tried in 1917 in the Soviet Union, and it ended badly. And I've been to these countries, by the way, and I saw the deprivation and the despair and the suffering caused by these idiotic policies. Okay, I'm being very blunt now. Okay, the price we pay for a very prosperous, the wealthiest countries in the world are market economies with private property and private companies that list on the stock exchange. So if we think, and so this is really driven by resentment, the fact that Jeff Bezos has this staggering, unbelievable amount of wealth, and so we're all getting our knickers in the knot. We should be instead asking, instead of getting upset about 1 or 2 or 500 or 200 billionaires, why don't we focus on the bottom end? And we have in Canada, much more so than the States, where through progressivity, we have redistributed income to the bottom. And they're now, if we say, well, it's not good enough, what that suggests is we should be raising taxes even higher.
Okay.
So
Look,
that's the answer to that question.
all right, we have 34 days of this, so we have lots of time to pick apart the economic policies of these various parties as they vie for our votes. But I thank you for your time this morning, Professor.
Welcome back.
Always
Thanks very
provocative.
much.
Thanks again. Bye-bye. Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. Yes, we are late for the news. It's coming right up on City News.
The Rock.
Local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, August 17th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 18 degrees. In Smiths Falls, 19. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Chair of the Transit Commission has written to councillors who requested an emergency meeting to deal with rail and bus issues over the last week. Alan Hubley telling councillors McKenney and Deans, while he shares concerns about the transit system, the full update will come during the regular meeting, and that is scheduled next month. Hubley also says the GM of Transit and the director have both been providing regular updates. Councillor McKenney tweets this morning they have petitioned members of that commission for a majority to request that meeting. If you choose not to get a COVID-19 vaccine, you'll have to be tested on a regular basis. That directive reportedly approved by the provincial cabinet last night for certain sectors of our economy. Here's City News reporter Laura Carney.
An official announcement on this vaccine policy for employers is expected today. The Canadian Press has learned the province's top doctor will announce a directive that if those in certain healthcare sectors and education workers are not fully vaccinated against COVID-19, then they will need to be tested for the virus on a regular basis. Dr. Kieran Moore's directive, which will cover hospitals, ambulance services, and community and home care service providers, will reportedly take effect September 7th. Dr. Moore has an announcement scheduled for 1 this afternoon. 680 News will carry this live. The source says the Ministry of Education also intends to introduce a similar COVID-19 vaccination policy for employees at all publicly funded school boards and licensed childcare settings. As for further easing of COVID-19 restrictions, Dr. Moore is reportedly considering keeping the province in Step 3 as is for the time being. I'm Laura Carney.
City News Time at 10:04. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Most areas will have quite a bit of cloud today. The high 22 degrees. It'll feel more like 28, though, with the humidity. Some more showers tonight and again tomorrow morning. And there's a possibility of some thunderstorms for Wednesday afternoon. Tomorrow's high 28 will feel like 34. For today, the high near 22.
And right now it's 18 degrees in Ottawa, 19 in Smiths Falls. Our Department of National Defence says 2 more planes have arrived in Canada from Afghanistan. These are carrying diplomats, special forces troops, and refugees who are fleeing the Taliban. The flights come after order returned to the Kabul airport after thousands of desperate Afghans rushed onto the tarmac on Sunday to escape the Taliban. The department says 1 plane carrying diplomats and special forces troops arrived in our city as part of the government evacuation. A 2nd plane carrying former interpreters and families arrived in Toronto. Tropical storm Grace has been drenching Haiti just 2 days after the powerful earthquake struck that nation. The storm adds to the misery. Thousands of people who lost loved ones, injured, or became homeless. Grace also forced overwhelmed hospitals and rescuers to act quickly. The country's southwestern area was hardest hit by Saturday's earthquake. It began to see heavy rain and strong winds just after nightfall last night. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
I want to know which of these 2 statements you agree with. Okay? I'm going to be keeping track here. Keep score here. I want to see what way you're leaning. Talkback Hour, Day 3 Federal Election Campaign, Rob Snow Show, 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Statement number 1. I think all federal government workers should be required to be fully vaccinated. Required, job requirement. And I think anyone who travels by air, rail, or a cruise ship should also be required to be fully vaccinated. Do you agree with that? Or do you agree with this, statement number 2? I think if federal government workers aren't fully vaccinated, they should be tested for COVID-19 on a regular basis. And people who travel by air, ship, or rail who aren't fully vaccinated should have to mask up and show a negative COVID-19 test. Okay. So what statement do you agree with? Because this has been all the talk of the election campaign, 2.5 days, 3 days in. 750-1310. Yeah, we're back to talking about mandatory vaccines. Maybe it was inevitable with the election campaign. Where do you stand on this issue? 750-1310. It's your hour. Love to hear from you. Mandatory vaccinations for every worker in the federal public service. What do you think of that? Mandatory vaccinations for anyone who travels commercially. I really want to know where you stand on this, ladies and gentlemen. Because here in the first few days of the campaign, it's kind of become the talk of the campaign, surprisingly. You know, the Liberals have made this proclamation, I guess you would call it, that if you work for the feds, you must be vaccinated. Don't come back to work unless you're fully vaccinated. And if you travel by airplane, railway, cruise ship, you must be vaccinated. Required. It would be required. You must be fully vaccinated. Now, that wasn't their position last week. It's only become their position this week. And then Team Trudeau threw the issue over to the Conservatives and basically said, okay, Mr. O'Toole, tell us where you stand. And he struggled with it. But despite everything else that's going on, and there's a lot going on, right? This is the issue that's really kind of taken on a life of its own here in the first few days of this campaign. Because some are arguing it's been mishandled by the Conservative campaign. And the critics point to, the 10 p.m. news release that was issued by the Conservative campaign. When was that? Sunday night, I guess. Clarifying or expanding on the party's position, the leader's position. And there's that old line in politics, if you're explaining, you're losing. If you're explaining, you're losing. 10 o'clock news release, 10 o'clock at night news release, that's explaining. Okay, here's what we meant after, dancing around it for all day. That means you're explaining, and that means you're losing. You're asked, whatever, a half a dozen times during your first media availability, first day of the campaign, you gotta think that question is coming, right? They set the table for you, but the skinny is the Liberals set the trap, and the Conservatives walked right into it. Ouch. Gotcha. And Erin O'Toole said his position is he's not opposed to vaccines. He's held the government's feet to the fire. Need more vaccines. Where are the vaccines? You remember that? I remember that. He thinks everyone should be fully vaccinated, but he's not for making it mandatory. Because he says there are other things that can be done, like testing, wearing masks. So I've heard a lot of people saying over the last couple of days, O'Toole and his people, they took the bait, score one for Trudeau and the Liberals. They found their wedge issue. That has been the early narrative, okay? That has been the early narrative. But now there emerges another side to the story. And that is the idea that this Liberal promise of mandating vaccines for the traveling public and for all employees in the federal public service is just a charade. There's no meat on the bone, the dog don't hunt, okay? And as proof there's this direction, this memo from the Treasury Board about coming back to work if you work for the feds and what the guidelines are going to be. And lo and behold, it looks a lot like what Erin O'Toole was saying just a few days ago. And there's really not a lot of daylight between the two. And to be honest, it was the Liberal position up until a few days ago. I'm really surprised that the media has not picked up on this to a greater degree, save for a column from Brian Lilly in The Sun and a brief mention in the Iveson column in the Post. Other than that, media has really not reported on these guidelines from Treasury Board. Rather puzzling, given how many questions the reporters have asked Erin O'Toole on this policy over the last couple of days. Dozens of questions. And yet a fairly significant development goes unreported. I can't really figure it out. Maybe you can. Treasury Board says, Treasury Board, in charge of the public service, right? It says, if you're not vaccinated against COVID-19, you are going to be tested, but you will be accommodated. They're working on accommodations for you. You'll be accommodated. Quote from the memo, for those who refuse vaccination, we will need to consider alternative measures such as testing and screening. So doesn't that sound a lot like what Mr. O'Toole has been saying himself? And tying himself up in knots, trying to say over the last couple of days, we're not going to mandate vaccines, but everyone should get vaccinated. We're not going to mandate it. And if you are unvaccinated, you have to be tested every now and then. Maybe it's every day, maybe it's every couple of days. I noticed that memo was online. It's not online anymore. It's been deleted. And I would remind, up until just a few days ago, it was the Liberal position. So again, I want to know where you stand on this, ladies and gentlemen, okay? At 750-1310, still a couple of lines available there. I have two statements here. One is, I think all federal government workers should be required to be fully vaccinated, and anyone who travels commercially should also be required to be fully vaccinated. Do you agree with that? Or do you agree with this other statement? I think if federal government workers aren't fully vaccinated, they should be tested regularly. And people who travel commercially who aren't fully vaccinated should have to show a negative COVID-19 test. Do you agree with that second statement instead? Which one do you agree with? I'm going to be keeping track. Let's get going here. It's the Talk Back Hour. Farhad.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir. You're on City News. It's nice to hear from you. Thank you for calling. Do you think all federal workers should be required to be fully vaccinated and anyone who travels commercially should be required to be fully vaccinated? Or do you think they should be tested on a regular basis and have to show a negative COVID-19 test?
Actually, I believe in neither of both.
Neither of them? Okay.
Neither, because I think the matter is becoming more political than actually a health issue. And if you look at the pattern from the beginning, like there is no scientific fact behind all the stuff that the politicians are saying.
Okay.
It's all gossip to me more than anything else.
Gossip,
Starting
okay.
from the bat in China, there was no bat, there was no proof of any evidence showing that this is a bat, this is how the virus got transmitted, what happened here. Nothing. It's just gossip. And
Just
then
gossip,
they said 2
okay.
weeks, 2 weeks of lockdown, okay. And then it became 3 weeks, then it became 3 months, and then it went for the phase 2 and so on, and it never ended. So if your measures really working, why are we still in this mess? Why is nothing happening positive? It's all negative, and it's getting worse and worse. Now they are talking about the passport. Now they're talking about the RFID chip.
Well, mandated vaccines. The issue today is mandated vaccines.
Exactly. And by constitution, they cannot force anybody or anything. This is all forcing people to do this, and that's not right.
Okay, not right. It's not right. It's not right. What about being tested? What about being tested on a regular basis?
Well, tested is okay, but
Tested
if it's
is
going to be very time-consuming, it's another issue. Because if you
It's not very time-consuming to be tested.
Well, I mean, if it takes 3 days to get the answer, that delays the whole...
It's a couple of hours now. It's down to a couple of hours now. When my wife and I went to Prince Edward Island, they tested her. Thank goodness, not me. They tested her. When we crossed into Prince Edward Island, they had the answer in 2 hours.
Right.
2 hours.
Okay, if it's a short term, that's fine. But still, I think people who are vaccinated should not be worried if this vaccine...
But you're totally opposed to mandatory vaccines, right?
I am completely...
Gotcha, man. Gotcha. Thank you for calling. I got to go. Okay? Thank you. Irene, hang on the line. I'm going to take your call next. This is the Rob Snow Show. Talk Back Hour. Mandatory vaccines. We're back on this hot issue at 750-1310. This is City News.
It started out with a small outdoor booth in what was called Artist Alley, which is actually the area just outside our store on William Street, where for a couple of years we sold our jewelry directly on the street. And then we slowly evolved to having an indoor location in this building, 55 Barwood Market Square. We then moved to another location in Place de Ville, and then moved back down here on Dalhousie Street at Irrigere in the 90s, and then back into this building again in 2000 as a collection. I do a collection of jewelry called Cirque that's mainly beaded work with a combination of semi-precious and vintage beads. And then she does a hat collection called Fanfreluche that's all cut and sewn hats in a variety of fabrics and for all of the seasons of the year. We've curated and sourced the artisans that we represent in a lot of different ways over the years since it's been, since 1985. Some people come to us since we're known, and other artisans that we represent might recommend that they come and see us. Some people we find at craft shows, or we see their work, somebody wears it in, and we go and track it down and bring it. And then some people, interestingly, are with us in one medium, and then sometimes they evolve to another. They're all Canadian and mainly local. With the roughly 50 people that we have, I'd say more than half of those are Ottawa-Gatineau, and then the rest are from other cities in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. If you can afford it, go to a small business and spend some money. It's lovely when you come in and, give me a pep talk and tell me how much you love this place and you've been coming here for years. But if you can afford it, please spend some money too, because all the pep talks in the world are not going to pay my rent, which is still full rent even when we're closed. Then secondly, if you can't afford to spend money, follow the businesses that you want to support on social media. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, follow their Twitter, and then retweet, share their Facebook page, like and comment, because if you can't afford to, as many of us can't right now, to do extra expenditures, doing all of those little things like that will raise the visibility of those small businesses and hopefully for them result in some online or curbside or other business for them.
Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
I think Mr. Trudeau's getting ready to do an event here from somebody's backyard in Markham, by the looks of things. I think it's from somebody's backyard in Markham. That's what it looks like. Erin O'Toole is on the Rob Snow Show at 11:30 this morning, the Conservative leader. I believe that Mr. Singh is campaigning in British Columbia today. I want to know what statement you agree with. I have two statements here. It's all about mandatory vaccinations, which has kind of dominated the first 2-3 days of the campaign. This one, I think all federal government workers should be required to be fully vaccinated, and anyone who travels commercially should be required to be fully vaccinated. Do you agree with that? And that's the Liberal position. Or this one. I think if federal government workers aren't fully vaccinated, they should be tested regularly. And anyone who travels commercially and is not fully vaccinated should have to mask up and show a negative COVID-19 test. Do you agree with that one? Which one do you agree with? 750-1310. Irene, you're on City News. Irene.
I'm fully vaccinated.
Sure.
I don't agree with the first one because I think the Liberals put that out as a wedge issue just before the election. I went and contacted Elections Canada last night. I was going to, volunteer or work, and I went and asked them, would the poll clerks beside me be vaccinated? And they couldn't.
And what'd they tell you?
Well, like I don't think anyone asked them the question. Like, they didn't expect that, because they're advertising on the website. Oh yeah, we got, be clean, the hand sanitizers and all that.
Right.
And I said to the guy, I don't want to be sitting beside a poll clerk for 8 to 10 hours.
Right.
And I'm vaccinated and they're not. That's put me at risk for $17.50 an hour. I said I could work at a Walmart.
Global News has a story came out yesterday. Because I saw something about this. Headline: Federal poll workers won't be required to be vaccinated. Elections Canada says.
Yeah.
Elections Canada won't require poll workers in the federal election to be vaccinated against COVID-19 despite the ongoing pandemic, the agency confirmed in a statement to Global News. Vaccination will not be a requirement for election workers, although we anticipate most will be, just given current vaccination levels, it said.
Yeah, well, I mean, like there are breakthrough cases.
Breakthrough cases. Yeah.
Of people who are vaccinated, and I'm thinking, why would I put myself at risk? I mean, I'm funny. I'm not concerned about the people coming in because I'll only be in there for a few minutes. But if you're there 8 to 10 hours or whatever,
right?
I don't know. It's a difficult question that you asked.
Okay.
I mean.
Well, do you think all federal government workers should be required to be fully vaccinated in order to go back to work?
Well, everyone knows that's not going to happen because the unions wouldn't allow it.
Well, but the Liberals say it has to happen. Mr. Singh is out with a statement today saying if you're not, you're going to be disciplined. You should be disciplined.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And the NDP is supposed to be supporting
They're for the working man. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, for the working man.
Okay,
Yeah.
what about people who travel commercially? Should they be required to be fully vaccinated?
Well, don't they have to have do that Canada app if they're coming in the country, if they're flying into the country? Yeah, I think they should.
I think
if
they
they're
should.
flying,
Okay.
because of the space, you know.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Irene. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Boy, it's hard to pin people down on this one today. Kerbrisha, I believe is how that is said. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, it's okay. There's honestly, it's people pronounce it different all the time.
Okay. How is it said?
Cabria with like a ya sound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for calling. Nevertheless, do you think federal government workers should be required to be fully vaccinated?
I do.
You do? And anyone who travels commercially?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right.
I am fully vaccinated, so I can understand there is obviously a bias there because I am fully vaccinated. But for example, my mother, she can't be vaccinated because she is allergic, so she does have an exception. We're waiting on when they can make vaccines for people who are immunocompromised, who are allergic to certain parts of the vaccine. But, in order to protect everyone who is maybe with a cancer patient who perhaps can't get it because they're taking chemotherapy, there are, of course, exceptions like that. And in order to, if you get vaccinated and you're perfectly healthy, you're not just protecting yourself. You have to think of other people, and you have to think of, those who can't get it yet. And if you're being inconsiderate and you choose not to be vaccinated, and I am, for example, like Irene just mentioned, and we're sitting in close quarters for a long period of time, you are putting me at risk of bringing that home. Perhaps I won't get sick and pass away, but you're putting my mother at risk. And of course, that brings in an emotional factor. But working in a medical facility, as I do right now, I've dealt with taking care of COVID patients and with doing mandatory masking and ensuring that if someone is presenting symptoms, we're doing swabs. We've actually reduced a large portion of those who are coming into contact with us and becoming sick. And we've lost no one so far at any of our isolation centers with the homeless population that I work with in Ottawa. And so, a vaccine only takes, 2 weeks to kick in. Then you take your second dose and you have pretty good protection. And for example, I'm headed out of town right now and I'm going to be doing a rapid test, and it takes 20 minutes to get the results back. My partner works on Parliament as a Mason, and it takes him 20 minutes to get a swab. And then once he has a negative test, he goes on and works. And although he's fully vaccinated, he does that to ensure that those who can't be vaccinated, who have cancer, who still work as Masons on Parliament, don't get sick.
Okay.
So,
all right. Good points. Good points. Thank you. Cabria, you said, right?
Yeah, and I wanted to ask one more, I wanted to inquire, not inquire, but I wanted to pry a little bit into one more thing before I go. With the Carleton University professor who was speaking on the phone earlier about certain subjects at the NDP, as a 21-year-old, back in 2017 when I was only 17 years old and I was paying for rent for an apartment by myself, it was $1,500, and I was trying to attend university, and it was nearly impossible to pay for that without having to work 60-hour work weeks. And I ended up having to drop out for about a semester, and then I started again, of course. Yeah. And mind you, I was in biomed, that affects me becoming a future doctor for this country. And then now I'm 21, and now for that same apartment, I'm paying $2,400.
$2,400? Holy cow.
So how is that?
You got to find a new place to live. You got to find a new place to live.
How is that fair to someone my age who's trying to work, and I still work while attending school?
It's crazy.
And OSAP does not give me enough money.
You got to get some roommates. You got to get some roommates. Okay, we got to go. We've all been there. 10:28, halftime. Rob Snow Show, Rogers TV, City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, August 17th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, some light rain and 19 degrees in Ottawa. In Smiths Falls right now, 19. And here's what's making news this hour. Ottawa Councillor Catherine McKenney is asking for a majority on Transit Commission to request an emergency meeting this month. Chair Alan Hubley rejected that request from both they and Councillor Diane Deans, who wrote with the initial request. McKenney says with issues on both the trains and the buses in the last week, they would like to hear an update and also have the opportunity to ask questions. Latest COVID case count in Ontario, 348 and 10 more deaths. Now, 8 of these deaths are the result of a data cleanup. They happened more than 2 months ago. Just over 17,000 tests were completed for these numbers. 12 of the new cases are in Ottawa. 2 are in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. No new cases today in either Eastern Ontario or the Renfrew County Health Unit. Day 3 of the federal election campaign, another day of party leaders hitting the hustings, making promises, trying to gain your vote. Liberal leader first out of the gate today, more coming up at 11 with our Parliament Hill reporter, Cormac McSweeney. The Every Child Matters March is approaching its destination of Parliament Hill. This began in Saskatchewan in early June with a residential school survivor leaving her home headed for Ottawa. The Every Child Matters March has passed through Carp now on Donald B. Munro and is headed for March Road this morning. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Mandatory vaccines back in the news. I have 2 statements here. I just want to know what one you agree with. There's this one. All federal government workers should be required to be fully vaccinated, and anyone who travels commercially should also be required to be fully vaccinated. That's one statement, okay? That's the Liberals' position now. It wasn't last week, but it's their position this week. Or there's this. I think the federal government workers who aren't fully vaccinated should be tested on a regular basis, and people who travel commercially who aren't fully vaccinated should have to mask up and show a negative COVID-19 test. Okay, so that's statement number 2. Which one do you agree with? Which one do you agree with? At 750-1310. I mean, this has been the discussion for the first 2-3 days of the campaign. Okay. And the Liberals threw this out there for nothing more than political purposes. Okay. To try and create a wedge between Liberals and Conservatives. They trot out this mandatory vaccination stuff. To me, I think it's a bit of a red herring. Even the Liberals admit they wouldn't be able to bring in this vaccine mandate until sometime in October, which I assume means, the resumption of Parliament. There would have to be some kind of legislation, you would think, MPs voting in the House, votes in the Senate, royal assent, the machinations of, well, if you remember, we used to have parliamentary democracy in Canada. Yeas and nays. 3 bags full. It's not like the Prime Minister can just wave a magic wand and make all of this happen. And I suspect compliance on vaccines is not going to be a big issue anyway. So, most people are getting fully vaccinated. There are going to be a few stragglers here and there. And it seems as though they will have to, well, the plan was, you're going to have to be tested. But nevertheless, it worked like a charm for the Liberals because the Conservative campaign lost the narrative for a few days. They weren't on their message, and it's only a 36-day campaign. So if you're already behind in the race, you can't really afford to lose any days, let alone 2 days being thrown off your message. So I suppose you could argue mission accomplished for the Liberals if the goal is to get the Conservatives talking about things they'd rather not talk about, then the Liberals managed to do that. Okay, back to the phones. Part 2. Talk back hour 750-1310 to Barhaven. Jason, good morning. Jason, you're on City News.
Hey, morning, Rob.
Yes, sir. Nice to hear from you. Should federal government workers be required to be fully vaccinated? Anyone who travels commercially be required to be fully vaccinated?
No, I don't think so.
Don't think so? Okay.
I'm on board with O'Toole's plan, and
O'Toole.
I think.
Okay, all right.
I think. I mean, as you said, the Liberals have created this as a wedge issue because they're looking at the numbers, right? Most people are vaccinated. Well, I think there was the number in a few days, but we're around 80% at least one shot, right? Nationally eligible Canadians, right? So most people are going to have an issue with having to get vaccinated. They're already vaccinated, right? But the thing is, they can't do it. Like, I have a good friend of mine. His wife works for the D&D Defense. She got an email last week. Anyway, the unions are fighting this tooth and nail, this mandatory vaccine thing. So, I mean, first of all, by the time October comes around, we're going to be probably up close to 90% vaccinated. Okay, then you're going to have what? Say, I mean, this is just off the top of my head, but 5% people are going to be medically exempt. So that leaves another 5% of people. Now, my take is mandating vaccines is going to make that final 5% dig in their heels, you know, because it's mandated, right?
Okay.
And I think the way to go, if you're making testing, make life hell. You know, if you have to get tested all the time.
Every day.
So every day, I guarantee you at least half of that final 5% is it's just going to be too much of a bother for them. So they're going to, as soon as, like the Liberals, it's the same thing as what O'Toole's doing. I mean, my take on it is that O'Toole at least stood up for his position, and Trudeau was deceitful. You know, he's talking about mandatory vaccines when he knows damn well he can't mandate them. Like you said, with a swing of a wand, you know. And another thing, I mean, this could potentially make it harder for a Canadian to fly from Ottawa to Mexico than from Vancouver to Toronto.
Maybe, maybe.
You know what I mean? That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the way O'Toole's going about it is he's doing it sensibly. He's making it inconvenient for people who are unvaccinated, and he's doing it without trampling on the charter. And I think that's the way to go 100%.
All right, Jason. Thank you for your call. So Mr. Singh weighed in on this today, the NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, with a statement. It said, quote, on Monday, Justin Trudeau and Erin O'Toole struggled to explain their positions on vaccinations for federal workers. Since Trudeau's last-minute pre-election vaccine announcement, he has refused to commit to timelines or explain how he would deal with employees who refuse to be vaccinated. Mr. Singh has called for a September 6th deadline for vaccination of federal workers and indicated that workers who refuse to be vaccinated could be disciplined. Okay? It goes on, quote from Mr. Singh. Today, Justin Trudeau refused to outline a timeline for mandatory vaccination for federal employees and could not answer direct questions about consequences for federal employees who refuse to be vaccinated. We have to be clear that the health and safety of Canadians must come first. To get as many people vaccinated as possible, we need to back up the commitment with actions. We will work with public sector unions to provide more education, remove barriers, give workers ample opportunity to get a vaccine. For employees who refuse to be vaccinated without a reason related to health status, we would expect that the collective agreement would be followed. All collective agreements include a process for progressive discipline up to and including termination. Discipline should always be a last resort, but may be necessary in rare cases to protect the health and safety of Canadians. So the NDP, I mean, ruling out, hey, you don't get vaccinated, you're fired. You're fired. What do you think about that? Holy smokes. Laying down the law. Cameron, Ottawa, you're on City News. Cameron, good morning.
Good morning. No, I disagree with all of it.
Disagree with all of it. Okay. All right. Now, by all of it.
Mandatory vaccines are wrong. It's unconstitutional. You can't do that to people and taking away people's jobs. I mean, you got nurses protesting this. You know, we've been hailing them as heroes for the last 2 years, and now some of them are in fear of not having a job because they don't agree with this.
Okay. What about being tested on a regular basis? Are you opposed to that, having to take a test on a regular basis?
In the Constitution that if somebody doesn't want to have something stuck in their body against their will, then you're not allowed to do that. And Trudeau certainly isn't going to decide what goes in my body, let me tell you.
Okay. All right. Gotcha, Cameron. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bye.
Opposed to all of it. Testing, vaccines, none of it. He's having none of it. Fair enough. Fair enough, sir. 750-1310. Still have about 12, 13 minutes to take some calls here. Jeremy in Orleans. Good morning, Jeremy.
Morning, Rob. How
So
are you?
I'm good. So you have this liberal position, and it's in a Democrat position. All federal government workers should be fully vaccinated, and anyone who travels commercially, fully vaccinated. The conservative position remains, look, we're not going to mandate that be tested on a regular basis. What do you think? What do you agree with more?
I definitely appreciate both sides trying to make an effort into curtailing this current calamity that we find ourselves in. I do find it a little peculiar that people keep citing constitutional rights and bodily autonomy, yet, innumerable amounts of times before that's not an issue. Anyways, these fear-mongering, right-winged control mentality type people are ruining it for everybody. The first caller you had on, he was talking about all this gossip, quote unquote.
Yeah, gossip,
and that's ridiculous. And you want to know why we're still in this position? It's because of that last caller you had and the first caller you had. They don't want to abide by anything. They're having parties and they're just letting loose. Yes, vaccines. Yes, mandate vaccines. Yes, of course. I took my 10-year-old daughter in to get a test, and let me tell you, she is stronger than me. And I'm going to tell you this once. I felt so vulnerable that I couldn't do anything to help my daughter because of these moronic, obtuse positions on medical science and democracy. We live in a democratic country, and these people want to throw that out the window because of a position taken by some unfathomably obtuse and ignorant position. I just can't even understand why we're still in this position 18 months later, because these people won't vaccinate. They won't take precautions. They don't do physical distancing. They don't do masking. They're having parties, and they're spreading this virus. It's mutating. I swear to you on everything that is good in this world, that if these people don't smarten up, we're screwed.
Okay. All right, Jeremy. Gotcha. Very emotional, very passionate there. Love the passion. Cindy in Canada. Good morning, Cindy.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Cindy.
I want to start by saying that I am double vaccinated.
Okay, all right.
But I do think that it shouldn't be mandated.
Shouldn't be mandated, okay.
No.
Okay, so if somebody refuses, what do you think about being tested on a regular basis?
I think everybody in the workplace should be tested regularly, and symptoms must be monitored, and that's the way to do it, because vaccine is a tool to control this disease. Even people that are double vaccinated do get the disease, so we have to keep up, put the vaccine in perspective. As in regards to traveling, I think if you're going out of Canada, the country that receives you will have policies in place. And don't forget, we have mixed vaccination in Canada, and some countries don't
recognize
that.
Yep.
So, we're playing like if we have it all figured out, but we don't. So that's my point.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you. We will stop here, and then we'll come back. We'll take the rest of our calls. There's one line available there as well. I want to hear you on this topic, okay? It's become the talk of the campaign here early in the campaign. The wedge issue for the Conservatives, mandatory vaccines. For the Liberals, mandatory vaccines. And now we've heard from all the political leaders with Jagmeet Singh saying, hey, if you refuse to be vaccinated, you work for the federal government. We'd love to work it out with your union, but you refuse to get vaccinated, you're working for the federal government, might have to fire you. You might lose your job. That's where we are right now in this debate. Rob Snow Show, Talkback Hour, 750-1310. This is City News.
This hour.
When you've lost your breasts, you've sort of lost part of yourself. And then all at once you're losing your hair. You don't know who you are anymore. You want to feel like yourself again. So I think that the store, a mastectomy store, is essential because you've lost your identity. And then all at once you're looking for a wig, you need a headscarf, you need a camisole. There's nowhere to go, there's no one to talk to. This should be essential because there are more and more women that are getting breast cancer. I think it's 1 in 6. They're becoming younger. I have a client that's 18 years old. And where do they go? They need a place like this that the women that work there understand. They know what you're going through. It's changed quite a bit. Our hours are different. We're now open from 10 to 5. We're not as busy as we were. A lot of women are afraid to go out. They're afraid that maybe there are more people in the store. So that's why I try and let them know you are alone. There's absolutely nobody in the store except you and I. If there is a woman that she's very afraid, I will lock the door to make sure nobody else comes in. I'll put a sign back in 10, 15 minutes just to give her that reassurance. Before we would have 4, 5, 6 people in the store. We didn't have to turn anybody away. Now we do. Some clients do leave and they're upset because they're in the store. They said, you know, we drove 20 minutes and now we're not allowed in the store. And I try to make them understand that there's somebody in here that's going through chemo or radiation. So that's sort of changed a lot, that we're not able to have more people in the store.
If we're talking about products, there's the bras that are adapted for mastectomy. The bathing suits that are adapted to mastectomy. We have special camisoles as well, and post-surgery bras. And then we have, for women going through chemo, the wigs that we have a big selection in the store as well. We have scarves. Some women don't feel comfortable wearing a wig. They prefer to wear a scarf or a hat, so we have a huge selection of that as well. We offer compression garments as well. When you're going through a mastectomy, you might have lymphedema in your arms after a couple of years, and you have flare-ups. So we have the sleeves, the hand as well that can be covered. We show each other's our scar. We talk about the treatments, how we felt, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. That's what makes us special. We have an added value in this store. Besides everything that's in the store, that's a product that can handle any problem that a client might have. Me and Linda, we've been through. We know how it feels in our bodies.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
I know the case has been made in recent days that Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, our guest at 11:30, the suggestion has been made he should have just kind of bit the bullet on this one and say, yeah, sure, mandatory vaccines for federal workers. Not a big deal for us. There's really no difference between my position or Mr. Trudeau's position on this issue, and then it's over, and then it's done, and then you pivot to all the ways conservatives are not only different, but superior to liberals, right? And you get on to talking about the things that you want to talk about, the economy, jobs, the cost of living. David Coletto out with a poll today for Abacus Data. Number one issue for Canadians right now is the cost of living. Why is it so expensive to live in Mr. Trudeau's Canada? If you're Mr. O'Toole, that's what you want to be talking about. You don't want to spend one more minute talking about mandatory vaccines. But thrown off script for a few days. But on the substance of the issue, that's what I want to know where you are. Should all federal government employees be required to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19? All commercial travelers, okay? Airplane, via rail, cruise ship. Required to be fully vaccinated, or can you get by with testing? Where do you come down on that? Let's go here. Barry in Brockville. Good morning. You're on City News. What do you think, Barry?
Yes, good morning. My concern is the side effects might not be out there for everyone to know also.
Okay.
So I'm very much against this. My wife, she takes the cure.
Okay.
For COVID. I come home, I catch her in bed with my best friend, and she said it's because of COVID cure. And this is insane to me.
Okay.
So To me, if it's causing this kind of sexual deviance, do not take the potion.
What are you talking about, man? Okay. Crazy people. Some people are crazy. Ian in Brockville. I don't even know what that guy was talking about, but I just hung up on him. I don't even want to know what he was talking about. Okay.
Well,
right.
I was gonna say one thing, but I guess I should retract that. And yeah, okay, moving forward.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Oh, the things that happen in Brockville. So Ian from Brockville here. Last time we chatted, Rob, I was kind of on the fence when we did our 3 days worth of polling.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do the same thing again today. There's, whether it be a couple ladies there that called in at the beginning of the callback hour, I have the utmost respect for their logic behind it. I obviously, as a full conservative, I have a lot of understanding for some other calls that were made. So at the end of the day, I haven't been vaccinated yet, as you may or may not remember, but I do talk to a lot of people. Definitely willing to go and get it done. Call it my morals, call it stubborn. I'm in that last 5%, but I'll go and do it. So
Okay.
I think if I had to choose, to keep us all on topic here, I think if I had to choose, are we allowed to ask them to find a better way to test me? Because I'm really for the mandatory testing, because we do have to keep in mind that there's other people, right? But
Right.
if I could avoid the
You'd be up for the testing if they found a better way to test you.
Yeah, either way, Rob, I will take the testing.
Take the test.
I'm still FDA issued, but at the end of the day, we need people to feel comfortable, even if I'm being silly and don't want to go get my vaccine, so we're going to have to stick to the testing for me.
All right, thank you. Okay, all right, okay. I'm still confused about what that last guy was saying, though. I don't know where he was going. Maybe that's more my fault than his. Elaine in Brockville. Lots of calls from Brockville. Good morning, Elaine.
You understand.
Hi, Elaine.
What makes that apparent to me at all?
No, Elaine's having completely her own conversation. I hate that. People call me and then they start having other conversations with other people. But you called me. It's not like I called you, Elaine. Ray, St. Albert.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Ray. What do you think about this idea? Mandatory vaccines if you work for the government or fly commercially. Mandatory, required.
No.
Okay.
What about these people who have all these other transmissible blood type diseases?
Okay.
Hepatitis, AIDS.
Okay.
These people work in the service industry, food industry.
Yeah.
I have an aunt who has hepatitis. She works in the restaurant industry, in the kitchen. She cuts herself, please, on something. You get an unscrupulous owner, doesn't want anything thrown out. And then inadvertently somebody gets infected.
Okay. Well, you wouldn't want that, right?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, okay.
But why aren't these things? There was a report of a gentleman, I think, out in Alberta, that he was mandated to get the vaccine or he gets fired. Spoke with his lawyer, stating that he wanted his employer to have the people who have AIDS, if any, or any transmissible disease that shouldn't be reported. He wanted the company, to provide these people with that information. And then the company said, okay, well, no, we're not going to do that. They backed off on their mandatory mandate.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so no, full stop for you. Just no, you're not going to go there. Okay.
Well, it's, and for not that I'm a conspiracist, but it's a 98%.
Right. Yeah. We don't need to get into all of that again. I love it when people start their stories by saying, not that I'm a conspiracy theorist. Debbie in the West End. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi.
Hi. I'm going to go for option 2.
Option 2, okay. We can get by with testing, you think?
We can get by with testing.
Okay.
We can do it.
Yep.
And you know what?
Yep.
Maybe enough people that are being tested all the time will get tired of it and just decide to take the vaccine.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess, but then the case is going to be made, well, what you're doing is you're coercing people. What you're really doing is coercing people, right?
Well, first of all, you're trying to keep people safe. Maybe even people that have had one vaccine until they get 2 should be tested every day until they get their second vaccine and the 2 weeks have gone by to say that they're okay. But I don't believe in, you can't travel, you can't work, You can't basically.
Well, Mr.
do
Singh
anything.
says
That's
you
what I
might have
call
to be
coercion.
fired. We might have to fire you if you work.
Well, isn't that great coming from the man of the people?
Man of the people.
The man of the union, the man of
That's
the
right.
everything.
Yeah.
What a joke.
Okay. All right, Debbie. Thank you. Eli. Good morning, Eli.
Hey, good morning, Rob.
Yes, sir.
So my take is that, if I get in a car and I don't wear my seatbelt, I get a ticket, right?
Sure.
And the reason is, if I get hurt, I get into an accident, I get hurt, it's going to cost everybody. I go to the hospital, everyone's paying my medical bills, right? Or if I smoke, if I buy a pack of cigarettes, it's highly taxed. And the reason is, everybody knows the reason. Like smokers go.
It's bad for you. It's bad for you. You're gonna. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So why should we all pay for some people who refuse to be vaccinated? All the evidence is there. I mean, the whole world is doing it, and yet I still, I have people sending me messages on Facebook and all kinds of nonsense of some idiot who's, who thinks they have some evidence as to why they shouldn't be vaccinated. And so I think there should be penalties for people who are, totally capable of being vaccinated and refuse to, and then get sick and cost us thousands of dollars.
Okay. Well, that's the NDP position. That, for example, in the federal public service, the NDP's position is you should be disciplined. Maybe you're suspended from your job.
Right.
Maybe you're moved to a different job. Maybe you're fired from your job. Are you okay with that?
All kinds of places are at threat of being shut down just because some people don't want to get it done. It's just like, why should we all have to pay for a few people who won't do it? How? Right?
All right, Eli. Thank you. Thank you for your call. Boy, opinion all over the place today. Split very much down the middle, hardly unanimous at all. And some people, they don't want anything to do with vaccines, and they don't want anything to do with testing, and they don't want anything to do with masks. They don't want anything to do with anything because it's their world, and we're just living in it. Coming up right after the 11 o'clock news, he's on the right side of things. Syndicated columnist and former speechwriter for Stephen Harper, Michael Taube, is my guest. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, August 17th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, some light scattered rain in the region, 19 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Councillor Catherine McKenney has asked for a majority on Transit Commission to request an emergency meeting this month. Chair Alan Hubley rejected that request from both councillors McKenney and Deans. McKenney, though, tweets the issue on both the trains and the buses in the last week should be updated at an emergency meeting so that they also have a chance to ask questions. The mayor is not in that group. Jim Watson this morning says staff have already provided all the answers.
We've issued a number of detailed memorandum. Another one went out last night from John Manconi. My number one objective is to ensure that our staff are working 100% of the time on fixing any core problems. They've done that, and we're going to move forward. We have a Transit Commission meeting next month.
Now, Watson says any additional questions can be directed to the Transit GM, John Manconi, now, or just wait, as he said, until the next Transit Commission meeting in September. City News Time, 11:01. The latest COVID case count in Ontario shows 348 cases and 10 more deaths in Ontario. 8 of the deaths, though, the result of a data cleanup, so they happened more than 2 months ago. Now, for these new positive case count, the tests completed numbered some 17,000. 12 of the new cases are in Ottawa, 2 in Leeds, Renville, Lanark. There are no new cases today in either Eastern Ontario or the Renfrew County Health Unit. City News Time, 11:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Most areas will have quite a bit of cloud today. The high 22 degrees. It'll feel more like 28, though, with the humidity. Some more showers tonight and again tomorrow morning. And there's a possibility of some thunderstorms for Wednesday afternoon. Tomorrow's high 28 will feel like 34. For today, the high near 22.
And right now, some scattered light rain. It's 19 degrees in both Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. The Every Child Matters March is approaching its destination of Parliament Hill. It's not scheduled to end until the 20th, so 3 days from now. But this is the march that began in Saskatchewan in early June as a residential school survivor left her home heading for the capital. Since then, others have joined Patricia Ballantyne to promote healing and awareness. The Every Child Matters March has passed through Carp on Donald B. Munro and headed for March Road this morning. 2 more planes have arrived in Canada from Afghanistan carrying diplomats, special forces troops, and refugees fleeing the Taliban. The flights come after order was restored at the international airport in Afghanistan's capital. The Department of National Defense says 1 plane carrying diplomats and special forces landed in Ottawa. A second plane landed in Toronto. That was carrying interpreters and their families. Most federal party leaders are focusing around the Toronto area today as they campaign on day 3 of the federal election.
Standing in the backyard of a supporter's home in Markham with families around him, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau is highlighting his government's pledge for $10 a day childcare and the deals that they've already signed with most of the provinces and territories. But Trudeau is also taking the moment to contrast his plan with the childcare tax credit promise from the Conservatives that was unveiled in the party's platform.
They're promising backwards Stephen Harper era policies that won't create a single childcare spot in Ontario or in any other province, or improve the quality of childcare anywhere across the country.
Conservative leader Erin O'Toole also in Toronto for an announcement later today before holding a rally in Richmond Hill. Green leader Annamie Paul is in Toronto as well to make a statement about the situation in Afghanistan. The NDP's Jagmeet Singh is in Coquitlam, BC to make an announcement about job creation before attending his nomination meeting in Burnaby South. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News. 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
He's on the right side of things. Syndicated columnist, Troy Media, Loonie Politics, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper. Michael Taube is back on the Rob Snow Show here on City News. And good morning, Michael.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you back on the program. Give me your thoughts. First few days of the election campaign. We're 3 days in. What have you thought of it so far?
Well, it's still the early stages, although in a 36-day campaign, we're actually almost a tenth of the way through, which is kind of hard to believe. But thus far, nothing terribly exciting, to be honest with you. It's been more international events that have been pushing the narrative, which includes obviously Afghanistan and the fall of Kabul, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But in terms of domestic issues, I mean, other than obviously a little bit of a kerfuffle for about a day with the Conservatives' first ad with, you know, a bit of a reflection of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which unfortunately did not go extremely well, but obviously
that has just been David has just informed me that has been it's been pulled from Twitter now because of a copyright complaint.
Well, I'm not terribly surprised when you think about it. I mean, they superimposed the face of Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, over it. And if they didn't ask for permission, I mean, that certainly makes sense. Look, I mean, some people are suggesting that it was strategic, and it is true that occasionally parties and governments put up ads to create a lot of buzz, even if it's negative. I don't think this was the case here. I just think it was just, unfortunately, a poorly thought out ad. I don't think it really worked very well.
Right.
I don't think it's a big thing that's been pulled. I just hope that for the rest of the campaign, for Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives, that the communications and public relations and others remains sharp and focused on issues and ideas, and we have less of the silliness and more seriousness.
Yeah, and if I'm Erin O'Toole, I want to talk about my issues. Okay, I want to talk about cost of living. You know, cost of living, housing affordability has a lot of interesting things in his platform about housing affordability and cost of living issues, for example. What I don't want is to get distracted by talking about vaccine mandates for 2 days, and I think he's guilty of that so far. What do you think?
Well, look, I think that all of the opposition parties, including parties on the left, will talk about it to some degree, even though we know that the vaccine distribution plan is back on target and our numbers are obviously going up, either with single vaccinations, which is pretty high, and fully vaxxed, which is getting higher too. It's still an obvious topic to bring up just based on the fact that earlier this year, there were a lot of struggles. There were a lot of issues with it. You know, we ran out of Pfizer and Moderna for periods of time. We had to obviously intermingle or intersperse AstraZeneca into the mix. And, you know, even though everything has obviously worked out for the most part, it was a bit of a rough period for a few months. And it's just obvious that the opposition parties on the right and the left are going to tackle it to some degree. But I agree with you that it shouldn't be the main focus, but it will be part of the focus no matter what for the rest of the campaign.
Okay. Well, what do you think of the optics of this? I mean, just watching it, there's Mr. Trudeau. He's got the big backdrop of Rideau Hall, and he's just out of his meeting with the Governor General, and we're off to an election, and here's why I think we're off to an election, and da-da-da-da, and on and on and on it goes. And in the meantime, you know, if you're watching it on television, the news ticker is scrolling across the bottom, and it's all about Afghanistan, Afghanistan, Afghanistan. Afghanistan is falling. Kabul is falling to the Taliban. This stunning turn of events and how this is all unfolded in the space of a week.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a really good look. It comes across as, opportunistic. What do you think?
Well, I think it was opportunistic when he called it during COVID-19, as we're still dealing with it right now.
Okay.
We know that obviously there have been provincial elections during this period of time since last March, when everything basically started and the global pandemic officially began. But at the same time, those were opportunistic as well, and the voters have decided for the most part to keep the governments in place, sometimes with increasing their seat total and sometimes sort of keeping it or hovering it around the same area. But unfortunately, I think when you look at something like this, even though we knew, very briefly that there were going to be huge problems with Afghanistan, we knew that the United States had said, going back to former U.S. President Donald Trump, that they were going to leave Kabul, leave Afghanistan. Current President Joe Biden has said of the original 13,000 U.S. troops that were there or situated there in 2003, they were going to be down to roughly about 650 or so in Kabul itself, which obviously is no longer going to be the case. That has turned out to be an enormous mess for not only the U.S. and for Britain and for Germany and for others, but also for Canada, who, as people may remember, and a lot of your listeners know, played a major role in Afghanistan in terms of helping try to create clean water, trying to help women's rights, and various other things. We had a real stake in there. I mean, when I was in the Prime Minister's office, I wrote speeches for Mr. Harper, who was not the first Prime Minister to start that off. It actually goes back even
third. He was the third,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, I mean, I certainly remember writing things about it. And anybody who was a speechwriter or worked for a minister at that time will remember some of the work that they did. Canada played a major role. No one is saying that, obviously, Justin Trudeau is to blame for what happened in 2003. That would be preposterous. But based on the fact of what was happening, based on the fact that everything was sort of collapsing at the seams, and the fact that Joe Biden and others had played their hands directly to the Taliban, who was a terrorist organization, and basically told them that, you know, we're going to get out by 9/11. That was what they initially planned the date for, the 20th anniversary of it. I mean, for God's sake, they basically gift-wrapped the whole thing to the Taliban, and they just blew the whole lid open pretty fast. So, yes, I agree with you that even for Canada and for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, it's a bad look, as you correctly said, Rob. And yes, the election should not have been called, especially when this was happening. But again, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has his own schedule, his own mind, and his own stubbornness to just keep moving forward.
Now, just sticking with Afghanistan for a moment, then what did you, and especially as a speechwriter, what did you think of Mr. Biden's speech last night?
A lot of damage control, I would say, is probably the best way to explain it. You know, basically, Biden came out and tried to reassure that he made the right decision, that we had to move out of Afghanistan.
No regrets. No regrets. He has no regrets. We have a clip here. Let's listen. This is U.S. President Joe Biden last night.
The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed, sometime without trying to fight.
Okay. They didn't try to fight, and their leaders fled the country.
Fascinating.
Yeah, what do you think?
They didn't try to fight for all these years, Rob. It really, it's astonishing to me that, you know, that they would actually even do that. I mean, this is the nonsense that, unfortunately, politicians, and Mr. Biden is not unique this way, where they're trying to justify a move that has not worked to their benefit or has backfired to some degree. Okay. We understand that. It happens, and obviously Joe Biden has scripted notes, which he goes out and he alludes to this fact, that fact, and as you said, he has no regrets about what he did when you know in private, and you don't have to guess this, of course he has regrets, major regrets, as any world leader would whose country was involved in Afghanistan for many years. So basically, the long story short, the speech was not surprising, but it was not actually it was not well-intentioned and it was not well delivered. And as some people point out, including some military experts who appeared on, I think, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and others, they've all sort of suggested the same thing, that this information was being fed to the U.S. government for former President Trump and current President Joe Biden, that that you've got to get moving now as quickly as you can to get as many American troops out as fast as possible. Because if you do this at the 11th hour, which they're doing right now, a lot of people are going to get stuck, both Americans and Afghanistan and Afghanis who are obviously sympathetic to the American cause. It's a complete and total mess right now.
Okay, right now, Justin Trudeau just said, because there was some equivocation on this, that as long as he is Prime Minister, he will never recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government in Afghanistan. Something that Mark Garneau did not say yesterday. Mark Garneau was asked about that yesterday. He would not say that yesterday.
Correct.
But Mr. O'Toole is pretty clear that on his position on that. So
very much so. No, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Erin O'Toole had said it 9 hours before they had released this, press release on this. And sure, what Justin Trudeau has said is correct, but he should have been first out of the gates to say it, not the opposition leader. But again, this is typical of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, especially when it comes to international affairs. He never leads, he always follows. And this has always been the case from 2015 on. And if you look at his history, he is never out front. my old friend and boss, former boss Stephen Harper, was out front. Other prime ministers, including Liberals like Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin, to be fair, were out front. Justin Trudeau is never out front. Think about it.
Okay. According to reports, the Prime Minister and the Ontario Premier, Doug Ford, have called a truce. They've called a truce. Peace, man. What do you think, Michael? What do you make of that?
Well, hold on, I got to put down my marijuana. But look, peace in our times.
Never mind. I shouldn't say anything.
I know. Look, let's be honest. Very quickly. Truces are not atypical. I mean, there are a lot of backroom things that happen. I know that some of the listeners might be surprised by this, but if you occasionally see campaigns where a candidate, a political leader, whomever, doesn't tackle a particular topic, especially if it's hot, while there may have been no direct communication between one camp to another, there's sort of basically an understanding behind the scenes that they're not going to tackle a particular issue in trade for another one. This happens a lot. Anyone who's worked in politics, and I have, has seen this occur before. What's unusual about this, Rob, is that it was publicly stated, which is very odd. I mean, I have not seen that happen too many times in my life. Is there really a truce on? It could be. It's possible. I mean, certainly Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, were at loggerheads during the 2019 federal election, so there may be a truce on. But very briefly, these sorts of truces don't last a long time. I said on Twitter yesterday that it wouldn't shock me if this was gone within a week or two. Maybe it'll last a little longer. We'll see. But
resumption of hostilities.
Yeah, but I think that Justin Trudeau is going to actually probably focus more on someone like Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, whose poll numbers are lower. Even though the Liberals are not going to have, obviously, enormous amounts of success in Alberta, they're going to want to try to sort of build support through parts of the West, get into BC, Manitoba, etc. He's probably thinking that that's his fine line because Ontario seems a little safer for him. But in the end, ultimately, I think that these sorts of truces, they're interesting. They're unusual to read about. They do happen more often than you think, but they don't tend to last very long. So just keep those in mind.
Okay. Thank you, Michael Taube. We'll talk next week.
You bet. Take good care.
Yep. Syndicated columnist, Troy Media, Loonie Politics, former speechwriter for Stephen Harper. That's Michael Taube. It is Election Day in the province of Nova Scotia. We go to our sister station, News 95.7 in Halifax. Coming up next, the news director there, Dan Ahlstrand, will join us. This is City News.
It's such a beautiful field because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manotick, the Manotick Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out of our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It is Election Day in the province of Nova Scotia. The polls will close at, I believe it's 8 o'clock Atlantic time, 7 o'clock our time. So let's review what this campaign has been like with the news director from our sister station in lovely Halifax, Nova Scotia. Dan Ahlstrand is back. He's with News 95.7. Good morning.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
I'm good. So the big day's here.
Yeah.
It has been a COVID election. So what has that been like for this campaign? Were they door knocking? Were there rallies? Was it largely a virtual thing? Give us a sense of that, Dan.
How about a little bit of it all?
Okay.
There were no really big rallies. There was small rallies. They would have the leaders would tour the province like they normally would, and they would have a few candidates around and a few people there, but there was no massive rallies or any of that stuff because of the COVID restrictions. As for the COVID vote, it's Nova Scotians are getting the message here, I think. We had almost 175,000 votes cast in advance polls. That ended yesterday. They opened all the returning offices here and allowed people to vote wherever they just could go into a returning office, didn't have to be in your riding, and cast a ballot. So it's like 50 or 60 or maybe even 70,000 more advance votes for this election than we had 4 years ago. So that's the biggest difference that I've noticed, at least so far. We saw it in New Brunswick when New Brunswick had their election when we were in the middle of the third wave, that there was a large turnout in the advance polls, and then a lighter turnout on the actual election day itself. As for what the turnout's going to be like, anybody's guess in a summer campaign, but I don't think anybody's expecting us to break records this year.
Okay. Who are the big players? If people are watching it on the news tonight, or they want to tune into some of the coverage, give us a quick profile of the party leaders.
Ian Rankin is the leader of the Liberal Party. Was named premier a couple of months ago after Stephen McNeil, who had two consecutive governments, stepped down.
He went to Blazes home, right?
He went to Blazes home.
Yeah.
He certainly did. And Ian Rankin won the leadership contest that the Liberal Party had. Younger guy, he's in his 30s, has made a few mistakes moving along, admitted to a couple of brushes with the law in his younger days, DUI, 2 DUIs actually, which kind of dogged him through the campaign. The leader of the Progressive Conservative Party in Nova Scotia is Tim Houston. Tim is an accountant. He's been in a couple of terms in as the MLA for a riding up in Pictou. Was a long way back in the polls when we started the campaign 30 days ago or 30-ish days ago, but has made significant gains during the campaign. So that was one of the questions I think everybody had was, does a campaign matter in the summer? Obviously it does, because he's made up, at least a dozen points, if not more. And the leader of the NDP is Gary Burrow. This is his second or maybe even third election. He is a preacher and is very his main campaign platform has been rent control. Rent control was brought in here in the height of the pandemic because we were seeing rents going up, 200%, 300%, 400% at some places. So the government instituted a temporary rent control in order to stop that. But it's in contingency with our state of emergency that's still on here. And once the state of emergency comes off, then the rent control comes off, and there's concern in the community that the rents are going to go up like crazy. So Gary Burrow's main platform for the NDP here has been that he's going to bring in, if elected, permanent rent control in the province. Biggest issue, I think,
healthcare, right?
Is health, and that always is, though, Rob. Really is. Most campaigns, everybody, it's healthcare. Stephen McNeil ran the last campaign on the slogan that a doctor for every Nova Scotian. Fell way short of that. Obviously, the pandemic didn't help. But the PC party and Tim Houston that's been their main plank of their platform has been that they're going to, bring more doctors, more nurses, and fix the ambulance system here if elected as government.
Now, you mentioned the ground that has been made up by the progressive conservative leader, Mr. Houston, over the course of this campaign period. Is it that the PC campaign was a superior campaign, or was it a series of self-inflicted wounds by the Liberal leader?
Well, the Liberal, I mentioned that the DUI, that was before the campaign was launched.
There was also the thing about the candidate in Dartmouth.
Dartmouth had a candidate that was nominated by the party, accepted. Then it was found out that she had sold some boudoir pictures, as they're being called, on the internet, and then was essentially fired by the party brass. That did not play well for the Liberals. But I think campaigns are important. We also had an incident here a week or so ago where there was an 80-year-old man that fell in his driveway. And broke his hip and was laying on the ground for more than 2 hours before an ambulance got to him.
Oh, yeah, waiting for an ambulance, yeah.
So that didn't play well for the government either, or for the Liberal Party. So, I think it's a little bit of both, Rob, to be honest.
Okay.
And I think that that Tim Houston was always going to campaign on healthcare, and that ambulance thing was just fortunate for him, unfortunate for the person involved, of course. But I think that, he ran a campaign, and his advertising was, Stephen. In fact, the quote is that Stephen McNeil did an okay job, but it's time to move on, right? So
okay, yeah. They've been in power for a long time, right? Already.
Well, this would be the third consecutive day. If the Liberals win tonight, it'll be their third consecutive term, which, as you well know, is a long time for any government.
So it might not know the winner tonight. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, with the amount of write-in ballots that are associated with this, and with the large amount of advanced ballots that they can't start counting until the polls close. And they, up until last week, where the Elections Nova Scotia was campaigning hard to get people to come out to work for the campaign. They say they've got enough people in place now, but they're also warning that if the count goes in towards the midnight hour, which is the magic hour, I guess, then they'll stop it down, and then they will start it again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So we may have an idea who the new premier of Nova Scotia is tonight. We may know for sure, or we may not know at all. So I've done these for a long time, and this is the first time where we're all kind of going, are we going to have a result tonight? But
do we order pizza tonight or not, right? Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Hey, thank you, Dan, for the update. Great to hear from you. Have fun this evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rob.
Dan Ahlstrand is the news director at our sister station, News 95.7, Halifax, Nova Scotia, where it is provincial election day. Erin O'Toole is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, and he's my guest right after this on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, August 17th. Good morning. I'm Alex Gouge. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 20 and cloudy, feeling like 27. Here's what's making news this hour. 2 more planes have arrived in Canada from Afghanistan carrying diplomats, special force troops, and refugees fleeing the Taliban. The flight comes after the order was restored at the Kabul airport after thousands of desperate Afghans rushed onto the tarmac on Sunday to escape the Taliban. The Department of National Defense says 1 plane carrying diplomats and special forces landed in Ottawa. A second plane carrying former interpreters and their families arrived in Toronto, the 5th such flight from Afghanistan since the government announced in July that it would rescue Afghans who helped Canada during its 20-year involvement there. Ontario is reporting a slight drop in new cases today with 348 infections confirmed. 10 additional deaths are being reported. However, 6 of those occurred more than 2 months ago and are being included as a data cleanup. Locally, there are 12 new cases in Ottawa, 2 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and none in Renfrew County or the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. This comes after over 17,000 tests were conducted, bringing down the positivity rate to 2.6%. The chair of the Transit Commission has written 2 councillors who requested an emergency meeting to deal with rail and bus issues over the last week. Alan Hubley tells councillors McKenney and Deans while he shares concerns about the transit system, the full update will come during the regular meeting next month. Hubley says the GM of Transit and the director have been providing regular updates. City News Time, 11:33. I'm Alex Gouge. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
And he is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Erin O'Toole joins me this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. It's great to be back with you.
Well, you're 3 days in. How does it feel?
It feels great. We've launched our Canada's Recovery Plan yesterday in detail. We launched the 5 pillars, as you may recall, back in March because our country needs a plan coming out of a tough 15 months, the health and economic crisis. So we're going to create 1 million jobs in a year, have an anti-corruption law, a national leadership approach on mental health. We're going to be securing domestic capacity in vaccines and other items and balancing the budget. So those 5 pillars we've now backfilled with really exciting policies. So yesterday was a great day for our team, but I think a great day for Canada because we've got the plan to get the country back on its feet and back on track.
And I do want to get into some specifics, and I will be, maybe I'll be accused of I don't know, giving you a softball or something here, or getting into something that's maybe not so serious. But I'm willing to take it. I looked at the cover. You're on the cover of the election platform document. Mr. O'Toole, I'm not joking, sir. You look great. You do look great. Have you seriously? Have you lost weight? Are you working? Are you exercising? Can you answer that for me, please?
Well, I've joked, Rob. My wife really likes that picture, and I am back into the shape. I'm almost back to my military shape. I'll never be in that great a shape when I was serving in the military for 12 years, but I ran a 10K the other day, and it's the best time since I left the military. And look, the running for me is great for physical and mental health. There's a lot of stress in this job. There's a lot of things that I'm always thinking about, and pounding the pavement early morning has allowed me to get back into sort of fighting shape for the battleground of ideas and the future. And so it's been funny to get some comments. I'm also known as, someone who's in a suit a lot, but that's a photo of me, how I kind of am when I'm not at work. And so my wife and some friends picked that photo out, and it's been funny to kind of hear some of the comments.
Okay. But it's been a concerted effort, though, right, to get back into shape. You have made the effort, right? You're saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes? Okay.
We all have our kind of pandemic pursuits. One of the things, when I wasn't able to travel, I wanted to have more dinners with my kids and my wife, Rebecca, and I wanted to make sure I got back into shape. And this is something that, I put myself back into boot camp.
Okay, good.
The military put me into boot camp. So yeah, it's been a good process.
Good for you, sir. Good for you. Okay, let's get into some specifics here. It's a very strange job environment right now. We have higher unemployment than certainly we had before the pandemic. It's about 7.5%, 8% nationwide, higher in some areas of the country. But at the same time, we have employers who are having a very difficult time filling vacancies, and there are hundreds of thousands of jobs that are going unfilled. So how do you solve the current problems in the labor market? How would you say your job creation plan differs from your rivals?
Well, our rivals have no plan to create jobs. And in fact, Mr. Trudeau just keeps extending programs that were created at the beginning of this pandemic. He's never tailored them to meet the needs of the pandemic of the crisis now. Highly affected sectors, as you're alluding to, Rob, restaurants, service industry, hospitality, tourism, they can't find people. And Mr. Trudeau's actually encouraging an environment where those small businesses in some cases are burning out. They're holding on by a thread. So we're going to reverse the approach. We're going to have a job surge plan where we're actually going to transition from the benefits Mr. Trudeau has and encourage hiring. We're going to pay for 25% of the salary for people that are hired, and we're going to increase that to 50% for people that have been chronically unemployed for more than 10 months. We've got Rebuild Main Street tax credits and business loans for highly affected hospitality, tourism, retail sections. We really need to kickstart hiring, not prolong people not working. It's unaffordable long term, and it's causing economic crisis in the country where we have a shortage of labor in some areas and unemployment in others. So we need to get the entire country working again.
Okay. According to Abacus data survey results this morning, the number one issue right now, this is again according to one polling firm, but the number one issue for Canadians right now is the rising cost of living. What would you do about it if you were Prime Minister?
Well, we've got a lot of things to address the cost of living, Rob. From the housing crisis, we're going to make sure that we're building more units and the federal government playing its role. We're going to make life more affordable for seniors and families. And today, I'm announcing an exciting part of our platform, a GST holiday for December. This will help both families at the end of the year make some purchases, save some money with the rising cost, but we're targeting it at bricks and mortar retailers. So this isn't to go and buy something from Amazon. This is to help some of the retailers who've been hit. So it's a very exciting.
So they won't have to charge the GST, is what you're saying, Mr. O'Toole? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
For December.
For December, you're going to get the GST holiday right at the cash in retail locations. It's exciting because it's going to be great for people purchasing, gifts before Christmas, that sort of thing. But for the brick and mortar shops that have been holding on by a thread, this is going to be in-person sales as part of our national Canada Recovery Plan.
Save the GST. Save the GST.
A holiday for the holidays. How about that? Perfect timing.
All right. Traditionally, the number one concern for Canadians has been health care. It has certainly dominated the provincial election campaign in Nova Scotia. We have seen throughout the course of the pandemic, provincial premiers have asked the current Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, for increased funding for health care. His priority seems to be child care. Nevertheless, what would be your plan to improve the Canadian healthcare system, given it is largely a provincial responsibility?
Well, there's a lot in our Canada's Recovery Plan on this, Rob. But first, I've said we'll be a partner that will not be a paternalistic Ottawa overlord. We will give predictable, steady, and increasing funding, 6% minimum per year to the provinces in the health transfer, and we're not going to tie their hands on how they tackle learning from the pandemic. We're also going to have a national mental health action plan. That's our third pillar, where we're going to work with the provinces, but also some nonprofit groups on the ground, which, as you know, we've had, veterans helping veterans that may be homeless in some of our urban centers. We're going to see some of the issues for mental crisis, opioids, other things. Groups on the ground, we can empower them through donations, and we're going to work with employers for mental health coverage, incentivize that, and we're going to deal with addiction. We're going to step up federally with some treatment beds and supports. Okay. So I think we're going to partner with the provinces, but we're going to show some leadership, because for me as a veteran, I've worked on mental health for many years. I want to show national leadership, because that mental challenge for many families will be with us long after the pandemic.
On childcare, Mr. Trudeau just did a campaign event in Markham with the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland. He was asked about your plan for childcare, which is not $10 a day childcare, but rather a 75% tax rebate on the cost for childcare. This is what Mr. Trudeau just moments ago said about your plan. I'd like you to respond, please.
Unfortunately, as we were all reminded yesterday, families can't rely on the Conservative Party's approach. They're promising backwards Stephen Harper-era policies that won't create a single childcare spot in Ontario or in any other province or improve the quality of childcare anywhere across the country.
Okay. Backward, won't improve the quality, won't create any spaces. What's your response to that, sir?
Wow, that's pretty out of touch. The Prime Minister thinks it's backwards to give parents the decisions with respect to their kids. That's one I'm going to keep in my back pocket, Rob. We're going to help all parents immediately. Mr. Trudeau may help some parents 5 to 6 years from now, and that's the difference. In fact, they've been scrambling to put together this concept that they're going to help people. It's not for years, and it will only help some people. We're going to help all families immediately. And coming out of COVID, one thing we've learned, Rob, is you need to give flexibility for families, because there's some families with shift work, with some disrupted schedules where they may be out 2 or 3 days. Some of the old-fashioned programs that are just sort of 9 to 5 don't fit all families. So let's let families make the best decision. Let's actually help the ones at the lower income levels the most. So ours is very income related. We're going to help those people a lot, but help everyone immediately. I think families, when they compare the two, they want immediate help and they want to qualify, not hope they might qualify 5, 6 years from now.
Okay, last question. If you were the Prime Minister right now, how would you be dealing with these scenes that we're seeing out of Afghanistan?
They're heartbreaking scenes, seeing people chasing airplanes, holding on to them. And I've been hearing from veterans that I know that are heartbroken, military families. You know, many of our veterans left part of themselves in Afghanistan, Rob. I've been advocating for many years for our interpreters, actually. The Trudeau government did nothing. And in the last 6 months, when we knew the pullout was coming, veterans, NGOs have been demanding the Trudeau government act for 6 months. He failed once again. He's just leaving people there, Rob. And some people are at risk because they helped Canada. They helped our soldiers. They helped our aid workers. I will never fail people that stand by Canada and our values. And it's the difference between Mr. Trudeau. Lots of talk, no action. I've got a track record of getting things done, bringing people together, and standing up for Canadian families.
Okay. Where are you going now? Where are you off to now? I see the plane is getting in the air here. What's going on? Where are you headed?
Well, the plane was exciting. Secure the future, as we're calling it. And we're in Toronto right now. We're going to be talking a little bit about the GST announcement that I debuted on your show, Rob. I scooped myself.
Excellent.
But we're then off to Quebec City and then out west later this week. And we're still doing some of the stuff in our studio as well. So we've got an exciting campaign. We've got Canada's recovery plan to sell. I can't wait to talk to more Canadians about it.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Hope to speak to you again throughout the campaign. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
We'll talk again. Thanks, Rob. Bye-bye.
Erin O'Toole is the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, as you just heard in Toronto today. 11:46. Chris Alexander, former Harper-era cabinet minister, former ambassador to Afghanistan, on the situation in that country right now. That's just ahead. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Part of the reason I got back into this is because I am creative, and I also wanted to kind of have a fun flair, 50s vibe. All of the boxes are kind of fun names, the colors are fun, the logo is fun, and it's not just the package that I want to bring joy to people's lives, it's also the feeling that they get when they receive it, to know that there's someone that thinks of them and they're missing them and showing that they care when they can't be there. The smallest of the subscription boxes is the red box, the classical box. So you would get 5 to 7 items from the variety of categories. Those do change quarterly. However, with items that are more popular, we'll bring them back as people ask for them, or you could get them as an add-on option. And then those items will be included in the Jazzy box, the same items from the first, although they'll be in a larger size, more quantity, as well as a couple extra items. And then in the largest box, the Doo-Wop Deluxe, which is our most popular, that is a comprehensive offering of all of the other 2 boxes, plus additional. So for example, if you were to get a certain item in the smallest of the boxes, that item would still be offered in the large, but in a bigger size. So you're getting everything bigger, plus an extra few items. The first thing is I look for Canadian suppliers and manufacturers. That is something I'm very proud of. I make sure that the products are safe, that they fit into the packages that we offer, obviously. They have to be the proper size and weight. I have approximately 300 items that we have so far that we can order that basically help make people's lives easier. There's snacks, there's self-care items, there's entertainment, a little bit of everything. And basically I try it and test it, and if it's duly approved, then I include it in our packages. So some of the categories that we have is we offer treats, which is of course everyone likes treats, no matter how old you are. So we have things like nuts, chocolates, different types of snacks, maybe a handmade piece of jewelry. We also include pieces of jewelry as well, occasionally. We also have our pamper items. So your pamper items would include things like your bath soaks, your specialty lotions, things like that. 2 other categories we offer are leisure. Leisure would include things such as puzzles, adult coloring books, paint by numbers, crosswords, word find, Sudoku, if that's how you say it. And we also have items for self-care and health. So masks, sanitizers, sanitizing wipes. They're all natural, non-drying, made with natural ingredients. So they're very good for everyone, especially in this time that we're dealing with.
Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
And talk about the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban. Chris Alexander served for 18 years as a Canadian diplomat. He was the first resident Canadian ambassador to Afghanistan. He was the Member of Parliament Conservative for Ajax Pickering from 2011 to 2015. He was Parliamentary Secretary for National Defence and Canada's Minister of Citizenship and Immigration. And he joins me this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
You have long said that Pakistan has been waging a proxy war in Afghanistan. Share your insights on what's been happening in that country, in your opinion, Mr. Alexander.
Sure. Well, it's tragic because this has been happening, and yet the world hasn't seen it as clearly as we should have, especially given that we were involved in Afghanistan for so long. I think the easiest way to explain it is that Pakistan's military, its top generals, its strategists, have had an obsession since the 1970s with finding strategic advantage over India. Remember back in 1971, there was a terrible war in what is today Bangladesh, and East Pakistan was lost to today's Pakistan and became an independent country. That was a defeat for Pakistan. That was a shock for all of them. And the officers who were sort of traumatized by that experience came up with this concept of strategic depth. They would not have East Pakistan anymore, but they would seek to dominate Afghanistan and Central Asia to give them a kind of half encirclement of India through the center and north of Asia, part of Asia north of India. And they pursued that in the late 70s. And then for 10 years, they pursued it with the U.S. as a partner because remember, the Soviet Union invaded and the U.S. fought the Soviet Union through Pakistan. But when the U.S. left that fight, the jihad with the Mujahideen in 1988, 89, Pakistan continued. And I don't think even very...
Did it ever stop? And it never stopped, right?
It never stopped.
Yeah.
It never stopped. And they had the Taliban there who were really Pakistan's proxies, treated Afghanistan like a fifth province of Pakistan for 5 years. And when that regime fell on 9/11, these generals were distraught. It was a major setback for them. But instead of just living with the new situation, they set about preparing to change it. And they were the ones fighting us in Kandahar through the Taliban. They were the ones supporting Mullah Baradar, who led the fight against Canadians for many years and is now their titular head, sitting in the presidential palace in Kabul. And they waited for a chance to launch a full-scale invasion using these proxies, which came when Joe Biden announced that the last U.S. troops were leaving. And by my reckoning, Biden's announcement was April 10th. They launched their full invasion to take over all districts and all provinces 1 month and 1 day later. Eerily, the day after Pakistan's top general visited Kabul, their troops, the Taliban, started moving.
This was the American president last night saying their political leaders fled the country and their army refused to fight. And he's been defiant. He has, I gather he's saddened by it, but he does not back down from his decision to pull American troops out of Afghanistan once and for all. This is what he said last night.
The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated. So what's happened? Afghanistan political leaders gave up and fled the country. The Afghan military collapsed.
Yeah. They gave
sometime without trying to fight.
Yeah, didn't even try to fight. What do you think? What do you think about the point of view of the American president right now?
Well, I think the remarks are pretty offensive.
Offensive.
He's
okay.
He's blaming the victim. He's the one that took the last troops out. He's the one that took 10,000 contractors away who were supplying remote outposts, ensuring aircraft could fly for the Afghan army. He pulled the backbone out of Afghanistan's military capacity while it was under attack, not just attack, but facing an invasion. And to say the Afghans don't fight is not just offensive, it's cruel and totally inaccurate. Tens of thousands, we don't know exactly, but 40 to 60, maybe 70,000 Afghan police and army members have died in the last 20 years, usually fighting alongside Americans, Canadians, and others. So I think it was a very, very sad moment for the United States yesterday when Joe Biden said these things. I haven't seen a single comment online, not really anywhere, where an American or anyone who knows Afghanistan was anything other than outraged by what he said.
Okay, Mr. Alexander, we only have about 90 seconds left. I have to ask you what you think the likelihood is of Canada's ability to resettle 20,000 Afghan refugees in this country with expediency.
You mean get them here or
get them here? Get them here. We got to get them here. Yeah.
It's going to be difficult, but we are the best in the world at doing this kind of thing. Our military is on the ground. Our aircraft are flying today, I'm told. We have the best immigration team, the best refugee resettlement teams in the world. Our challenge will be to try and benefit the most vulnerable, to try and literally save lives of people who, because they worked for the Afghan government or worked for NATO allies, are going to be otherwise shot by the Taliban. And that is happening. I'm getting reports every few minutes about Taliban going door to door in Kabul and across the country, pulling people out of their homes, and if they've worked for special forces or police or the security service, shooting them on the spot.
Terrible, terrible. We're watching it with great interest, sir. We hope we can call upon you again. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Former cabinet minister and Ambassador Chris Alexander. This has been the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays 9 to noon on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.